You are now tuning in to the Roughnecks Podcast with your host, Cole Nixon. Much love.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Roughnecks Podcast. We're in another new studio. We're always in new studios nowadays. I think I've recorded like 3 at home lately in the past month, but that's fine. I like it. I like travel podcasts anymore. But we have been cranking out the episodes lately, all kinds of, sometimes 4 times a week, sometimes 3 times a week. It just depends on the week. There's a really good one coming out later in the week after this one that you will not want to miss. It's got a voice that hasn't been on the podcast for a while that you guys might want to hear. Other than that, we got the volleyball tournament information that's going to be coming out probably the first of the year. There's some new stuff that we have going on with that, so be on the lookout for that stuff and get your teams together to get ready for the 2025. It'll be the 3rd annual volleyball tournament. But other than that, joining me today is someone I have a long history with, but a short history with at the same time. It's kind of a complicated thing. There was a dry spell in between that. And it was kind of funny how we got reconnected, per se. But other than that, Josh, welcome to the Roughnecks Podcast.
Thanks, man. Excited, a little nervous, but glad to be here. Glad we finally could figure out a time to make this happen.
That's been the story of my podcast lately. It's like I find people, and then like Nick Showman, I know was like I think a 2-month process of finally getting a date together. Same with Brandon Freeman. Same with a lot of other people lately. That's just kind of how it's been. It's like trying to, especially now we're on the holidays and everything, trying to schedule everything. And I mean, the people I have on are usually all busy people, so it's hard to get them. And I'm busy, so that doesn't help either. But yeah, so just to kind of kick off the episode, I always allow the guests to give a background on themselves. So just for the listeners who may not know who you are, just tell us kind of the rough background on yourself.
Well, that's pretty, there's a lot to that, right? I mean, we've kind of talked about this, but, from the area, grew up in Perry County. I went to Sheridan High School, moved away for a while, did a bunch of different things, lived in North Carolina, lived in Wyoming, kind of looked around, moved to North Canton, up in that area, lived there for a while, when I first got married. And then me and my wife about 10 years ago decided to come back to the area. And so we came back here and been doing that, currently, work for recruiting for the military, but got a lot of other little things going on here and there. And like I said, it's, for me, it always seems like the next adventure tomorrow, what are we going to do? It doesn't seem like I do things for a long time for whatever reason, but, but I'm sure we can talk about that and stuff, but that's kind of who I am, and what I'm doing or where I'm from.
Yeah, left is short. That's the thing is, I remember when I first asked you to be on the podcast, you called me and you go, what do you even want to talk about? You want to talk about military, the fishing, bull riding? And I was like, oh, so you're just going to keep going down this list and make it easier for me to have a million different things that you could talk about?
Yeah, there's it's funny, right? Life's funny, right? Like there's so many chapters to it, and there's some that have closed, some that are still here. There's, chapters that were written that I would have never planned to be in the book either, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. It's just, what do you want to talk about? And, I'm sure I'll try to keep stories short. That's probably one thing my wife will tell you is like, I don't know how to tell a short story. And, but yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate, right? I'm not going to lie. Like been fortunate, to do a lot of different things. And I've done what I've wanted to do, some with success and some with failures, and that's okay, but that's, when you asked me to do this, it was like, oh my gosh, what do we want to talk about? Because there's a lot of different things. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I want to kind of start at the beginning a little bit, because did you join the military right out of high school?
No, I didn't. Okay. So we can start with the military, I guess, because it does kind of all go together. But military was, both my parents served, right? Okay. So my mom and dad actually were both Army. They met in Germany, knew each other for a very short time, got married. And then, it wasn't foreign to me to serve in the military, right? Both my grandfathers, my one was in World War II, my other grandfather served. And so and we've had lots of aunts and uncles that have served in the military. So it wasn't foreign to me, right? And, I kind of looked at that path early in high school. And to be honest with you, it's kind of funny now that I'm a recruiter because, we went and talked to a couple branches of service at that time, and my mom went with me. And my mom knew the questions asked. I didn't, like, I'm just like, oh, here you go. Like I didn't even know much about it.
Right. And
she's asking questions and, twice, like it was like she caught recruiters not telling the truth. And that kind of turned me off. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so, it was one of those things where, it wasn't that I was against the military, but I just, that short span left a bad taste in my mouth. So, when I left high school, I mean, if you would have told me at 18, and I tell people this all the time in presentations, and now that I am a recruiter, like this was not my plan at the time. Right. And we've talked before about it, but that wasn't like, I didn't see myself ever being in the military. Some things in life kind of happened, and a couple of years later it became an option, but at that time, it didn't. So, for me, it was, it's really hard to talk about one or the other because they all kind of, there's things that from one thing to another that kind of to play into this. But, the way I ended up in the military, is we talked about, is I'd moved to Wyoming. I'd gone to college for horses, equine, and I was always infatuated with livestock and
Is
rodeo.
that what so that's what you wanted to do out of high school was go do that stuff? Okay.
Yeah. So that was, I mean, as a kid, I became infatuated with the sport of rodeo. I don't know why, right? Why does a kid from Ohio whose family has nothing to do in the rodeo business?
It's kind of natural. Like with a lot of kids, it's like, I feel like it's maybe less nowadays. Like if you live out in the Western states, I feel like you see more kids that are, more infatuated. But like you said, Ohio is a little bit different, but I feel like, it's normal because like kids want to be cowboys. Kids want to be because you always play what is it? Cowboys and Indian,
right?
I don't even know if that's a game you're allowed to play anymore, but there was always the games and stuff, and it was something that kind of just became an infatuation in our minds,
right? And I think for me though, like I mean, at that point in time, I was growing up in Gahanna. I'm 7-8 years old, and I'm getting up on Saturday mornings instead of watching cartoons. I'm watching rodeo on the TNN, when they still had TNN, and I'm watching the bull ridings on Friday nights from Mesquite, Texas, and that was. So I became infatuated with that. And it was just, I always kind of felt like, this is what I want to do, but I took a pretty normal path through, I played sports growing up, played baseball, football, basketball, got into high school. Right. But it was always there. Right. And it was probably my freshman year, a buddy of mine is, and he still rodeos his kids at high school, does high school rodeo now. We're having a conversation one day, and he's like, hey man, you want to come hang out at this roping farm? And I'm like, yeah. Right. Cause I mean, I was obsessed, like anything I could do to get a hold of any part of it. Right. Just to taste it. Right. I didn't care if it was, and it's a roping farm. Right. And there, but I don't care. It's rodeo. Right. To me, it's the grandest stage that there was at the time. And, so I wanted to be a part of it. I didn't care in what aspect, so I started hanging out at a roping farm, and then, a couple years, a year later, we're showing steers and horses at the Perry County Fair, and they have a rodeo there. And the next thing I know, these two buddies of mine, same one, comes and grabs me, and he's like, hey man, Barnes Rodeo needs help, stripping the bucking stock, the flank straps and the saddles and all that off of them. Do you want to help? And I'm like, yeah. Right. So here I am now. It's a small pro rodeo, but I mean, Barnes PRC has been around for forever, and they're out of Iowa, and so I'm doing this, man. And it's just like, I could feel it. Like it's in me. And, so we kind of, that became the passion. Right. And, so I decided I was going to go to school for horses, and I was going to move to Wyoming, and I was, I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. I'll be honest. I was convinced I was, we didn't grow up on a farm. Like we showed cattle, but we didn't show high dollar cattle. We were going to Perry County, and we were doing it for the experience, right? Yeah. Like I had no aspirations of winning or anything like that. And, but I loved it. And so this thing kind of turns over the time. It kind of turns into this. And, so I decided I'm going to move to Wyoming. Or I'm going to move out west. I'm going to go work on a ranch. And I started applying to schools for equine and livestock. I'll be honest, like most people don't know this, like and probably some of my friends I grew up with didn't know this, I'd never been on a horse in my life. So, like I didn't care. I was going to find a way. Like that's how excited cause I didn't care. It felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. And, so, my senior year of high school, me and my mom used to fight about this, man. I wanted a high school rodeo. I wanted to start riding bulls, and she's like, you're going to get hurt. And I get it. Right. And let me preface this. Like I was never going to be, as we go through this, I would never turn in. I was never a big time rodeo star. Right. Like I can tell you all these people and I've met them, but like, they don't know who I am. Right. Yeah. But that's but I was like, I got to do this. And, we argued and, my dad finally came to me and he was like, look, just play your senior year of high school football. After that, if you want to ride bulls, go ride bulls. I don't care. But I don't want you to get hurt and then not be able to play high school football because, now as a parent, I get it, right? Like at times I was like, all right, whatever, Dad. But I get it.
We feel like we're invincible. We're not going to get hurt, first off.
Right.
Even though in the back of our head, we kind of know there's that chance.
Right. So, I'm with Dad and, so I make the deal with Dad. Yeah, okay, I got it. And, now looking back, like, yeah, man, I mean, we went state Final Four in football. And, to think that if I would have got hurt and missed out on that, like, you can't get that time back, And so fast forward, football's over. And I'm sitting there at lunch one day and a buddy of mine at high school, and they're sitting there at Sheridan and goes, hey, man, he's like, my dad told me they're bucking bulls up at the Millersburg Fairgrounds on Sundays. And I'm like, what? Like, here we go. Right. Like, he's like, do you want to go? So I'm like, yeah, man, I'm in. So me and there's 4 of us, 2 of us at Wonder Ride, and we drive up to Millersburg on a Sunday afternoon. And this is back in 1996, and we walk in, first question asked, are you here to ride bulls or are you here to watch? Well, I'm like, I don't know anything about it. I don't have equipment. I don't know anything,
Right.
I've seen it on TV, right? Like I've seen it, and I love it, and I've seen the movie 8 Seconds 1,000 times, but I don't know, like the first thing about it. And so, and of course, like I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm 17. Yeah. So I can't even sign a waiver. Right. So, but they're not asking and I'm not telling.
Exactly.
So, so I'm like, but now it's like proof, it's time, right? Like now it's, put your money where your mouth is. You've been talking about this. But I'm kind of like, let me see how this goes. Right. Cause it's all foreign to me. We sit down in the bleachers. We're like, yeah, we'll let you know. And they're like, well, if you change your mind, we got equipment, whatever. I watch one guy and I'm like, I got to do this. Like, I got to do this. Like, so walk back behind, walk over, tell them, hey, here's my money. Right. They don't ask if I'm 18. They're like, hey, we need you to sign this waiver. All right. I signed my name to it, and signed my name to the waiver. And, next thing I know, I'm crawling over the back of a bucket chute. And I'm sitting down on a bull that is not even a rodeo bloodline bull, probably a Hereford bull. They got somewhere I don't even remember. And they're just telling me what to do. I don't remember anything. I'm just like, okay. Last thing I remember, they were like, hey, nod your head. And next thing I know, I'm laying in the dirt and I get kicked. And I'm like, I get up and I'm like, that was cool, right? That's pretty cool. But then I'm also in shock. Like I'm trying, because it's all a flash. So, that kind of kicked it off. And then, I started rodeoing and it was a struggle. I mean, like I said, I'd never been on a horse, so I couldn't pick up time. Same buddy took me to Roping Farm, calls me and says, hey man, you want to come ride this horse? It'll help your bull ride. And it was his mom's horse. And next thing I know, I got there and ride, and they're like, and his dad, we had grown up together. We were really good friends, and he was just like, hey, do you want to show this horse at the fair? And I'm like, man, yeah. And now they live all the way over in Somerset, okay. So they're 35, 40 minutes away. And so I made the decision at that point, I wasn't going to play baseball my senior year. Just didn't want to play. Like it was fine, but to be honest, I wasn't getting a lot of playing time as a junior. And it wasn't, I'm not going to say, I'm sure people were like, oh, he's going to say because of the coach. And this, I'll be honest, I just didn't put the work in. it wasn't a high priority for me. And this
that was me with basketball my senior year. I almost didn't play, but I ended up playing. But it was the same thing where, the playing time was like, yeah, not exactly. But also I put more focus on football than I did basketball.
Right.
And that was what I thought I was going to go do anyway.
Yeah. And I think I probably didn't play baseball. And it's funny now, right? I probably like the game of baseball better than I do football. Like, I really, I love going to the ballpark. I love going to a baseball game. I don't care so much anymore about going to an Ohio State game. I'd rather sit at home and watch it. But
exactly,
so started riding horses and got accepted to Hocking College. And next thing I know, I'm down there. And
that sounds familiar.
Yeah,
I believe that's somewhere somebody tried to get me to go to Hocking College.
I did try to get you. Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk about that here in a minute if you want. We were looking at options for you, right? Because you didn't have a lot of offers at that point in time.
I didn't technically even really have an offer. I don't count D3 as offers. I really don't.
Right. So we were trying to figure out, for you, kind of what you want to do. But, I went down to Hocking and I took their what they called at the time backcountry horsemanship program. And, and it was everything that it was all geared to going out west to work, right? From horsemanship to riding lessons, horseshoeing classes, leather work. And I went and did that for the year and I started rodeoing and, went to a bull riding school that summer. I took graduation money and that's what I spent part of it on.
What does a bull riding school consist of? Because I've heard it multiple times and I think there was somebody else that's been on the podcast that either did bull riding school or knew somebody or knew about it. What exactly is bull riding school?
So it's a clinic, right? I mean, it basically, you go to these clinics, right? And some of them are put on by a local guy, right? Hey, I'm going to put this on, not gonna say that's a bad idea, good idea, whatever, right? That first one I ever went to, that's what happened, that's where I went, but most of the time they're put on by, guys that are professionals or former world champions, retired, whatever. And they put on these clinics and basically what they do is they go and they put you through, it's kind of like a clinic, right? Same thing we would do with softball, right? It's a fundamentals clinic or basketball or football. So they teach you how to properly get on a bull, right? The right equipment you should have. Hey, this is what you should have. And they inspect your equipment, make sure it's safe. And it's, not obviously rodeo's a dangerous sport, but they're trying to, make sure, hey, you at least got the right equipment, right? And this is how you put your rope, how you get on a bull the safest way possible. This is how you, ride. This is the proper mechanics. And they teach you that, right? So, and they bring stock in or livestock, they bring it in that's compatible to your levels and you learn, right? Like we're not going to go to a school and get on a PBR bull,
right?
Like a top level pro bull because you're gonna get hurt, so it may be a steer, that just jump kicks down the pen and, had, done that, went to school and started trying to figure out where I was going to go work. Decided I was going to go to Wyoming the next summer. Right. And I was like, started looking around and I'm like, but I really want to rodeo too. And, that's always when people are hiring you to work on a ranch, right? If you're hurt, you don't do them much good. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of question, I didn't know, are they going to hire me or whatever? And at the time I'd found a guy out there that had, it was like a guest ranch, but it was all rodeo based, right? He was raising bucking bulls. And so I got a hold of him and I was like, dude, this is going to be the best summer ever, right? Because he's got stock for me to get on, so I'm going to be able to ride. Plus, I'm going to get paid. And he was just starting this deal up, and it didn't work out. He was like, man, he's like, if you can't find something else, he's like, you come here and hang out for a month if you want, but it didn't. And so, excuse me, but so I had to start looking for something, right? Where am I going to go do this? I want a rodeo, and so I picked Cody. I picked Cody, Wyoming. And I was like, okay, what's everything within an hour and 15 of Cody? Because Cody's got a night rodeo every night of the week from June 1st to the end of August. So at the time I thought this is going to give me the best opportunity to be able to ride and then, still work. Right. And so I started applying to ranches and I got hired on luckily at a ranch in Shell, Wyoming. Kadesh Ranch is the name of it. So I don't even think it's it's a still working ranch, but I don't think it's a guest ranch anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I moved out there and I was out there for 3 or 4 months working. And I just knew at that point college was not for me. I just didn't want to come home. I wasn't happy. And it wasn't that I didn't want to come home. But I knew what I was going for to school for, like I didn't know, like, I just didn't know if that's what I wanted to continue to go to school for, and, we're working, we were working, 6 days a week, from whatever in the morning until, 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And, it was fun. I mean, we spent 8-9 hours a day on horseback, we're chasing cows, we're giving rides, we're fixing fence, we're doing that stuff, right? We're cowboying, right? So I'm living my dream, but I'm just not making any money, and so I had to figure out, so I knew like, this is great for now, but if I ever want to like own my own place or my own truck or my own saddle, like I can't do it doing this. But I knew college wasn't what I wanted. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. Right. Cause I put all my eggs in that basket, like for 6 years leading up to that. I knew that's where I wanted to be. And that's hard, right? That's hard when you're like, man, I'm living life. I'm loving it, but I'm not making money either. And what do we do? Right. So, I remember my mom came to the ranch. She visited. I was there, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I want to go back to school, Mom. And so she was like, well, whatever. And she's like, well, you need to figure it out. So I ended up making the decision. I was going to come home, and I came back home, and I was, to be honest, man, I didn't know what I was going to do. I went back to Hocking College. I dropped out of their horse program. And at the time, because I was kind of an adrenaline junkie, I'd gotten on the Thornville Fire Department prior to me going to Wyoming, right? Because I'm like, hey, that's exciting. Like nothing, so thought maybe I want to go be a professional firefighter. And I went to, I was going through that and I was doing that, and it just, it was fine, but it wasn't there. Like what I really was wanting is I wanted to go rodeoing, but I didn't have any money and I didn't have insurance. Yeah. And, so, I'm sitting at the house the one night, and my mom walks in from school, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I remember she slides me a card across the table. And you've probably heard the story when I tell presentations, cause I talk about it, but she slides me this card and I pick it up and it says U.S. Army. And I'm like, oh, hell no. Right. And I slid it back, and, and she literally has a conversation with me, and she's like, just go talk to him. Give them 5 minutes, 50, an hour of your time, 15 minutes of your time. Go see what's out there. You might learn something. And to be honest, I hadn't really looked into it. So I had all the preconceived notions, right, of this is what it is. And this is what basic training is like. And I didn't know, right? I didn't know the options that were out there. So I went down to, so I called the guy in Zanesville. I go down there and, I sit down with him. And I'm going to join the reserves. Like that's what I thought I was going to join. And I'll be honest, it's funny because I'm recruited for the Guard now. I knew nothing about the National Guard at the time. And so I'm like, I think I'm going to join the reserves. And I start talking to this guy, and he's like, what do you really want to do, man? And I was like, I want to ride bulls, And I was like, I need money and insurance. And I was like, I want to get some money for college and stuff. And, so, he's like, they start telling me all the things. Hey, these are the benefits. You got insurance. You got this, right? And I'm like, yeah, but you can't get your ride bulls for the Army. Like, it's, that's not realistic as far as I'm concerned, right? And, I know the Army's at that time is sponsoring pro rodeo cowboys, or, had in the past, and, but they're the top guys in the world, right? I mean, these guys making a living rodeoing, and so I'm like, they're not going to sponsor, I'm not getting a sponsorship. So, but I start talking to them, and of course I'm in, I'm in boots and jeans, belt buckle, right? I mean, farm kid. And the recruiter's like, hey, why don't you just take this test, this practice test, and let's just see if you're qualified. And I'm like, all right. Well, I'm an honor roll kid. I took college prep classes. I've been to college. So I'm like, all right. My mom's a AP calculus teacher, and, my dad's got a degree. So, I mean, like, school's important in our house. And I start taking this test and I get done, right? And they're kind of not really giving me the time of day, because I think they thought I was going to fail the test, because I thought I was just this hillbilly kid. And so sure enough, pass it, I get the test, I get done, man, I flip it around. And the guy's like, oh my God, like, well, let's talk, man. Like, they're super excited now, right? Because I've got a passing, I had a good score on the ASVAB test. And so I started talking to them, and actually, my recruiter, man, and it's funny, it's been 25 years and I still remember the guy's name. Jerome Tebow is his name. And, I haven't seen him in 24 years, right? But, like, the dude was legit. I sat down and talked to him, and he gave it to me straight, and so needless to say, like, next thing I know, I bring him to the house. I want him to talk to my mom and dad, right? Because I'm like, mom's going to tear him up, right? Mom and dad, they know what to ask. Like, I'm going to catch this guy in a lie. And if I do, I'm done with this. Yeah. And he was straight, man. He was straight. And I think that's, that experience is, I've always tried to be straight with people, as a recruiter because, that opened up a lot of doors for me. And, so next thing I know, man, he leaves the house and I'm talking to my parents and I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, I think it's a great idea. And I'm like, all right. So I call him. I'm like, hey man, let's do this. Right. Let's go. And, so next thing I know, man, I'm at MEPS and then they tell me I'm disqualified. So tell me I'm colorblind, right? Which I wasn't disqualified, but anyway, went to MEPS and I go through the whole process and, they tell me I'm colorblind. So now I'm like heartbroken, right? Cause I know I'm not colorblind, but for whatever reason, I don't pass colorblind tests. I don't know what happened. And, so I'm talking to my recruiter and, Tebow's like, he's like, man, what do you want to do, dude? I'm like, dude, I want to get in, but I'm not, I could still get in being colorblind, right? They offered me to be a paralegal. I just dropped out of college and I don't like reading, right?
That's a lot of schooling.
Right. Like I don't like, I'm not into reading, and that's, I'm a horrible reader, right? My wife will tell you, like even reading to my kids, sometimes I think she looks at me like, how did you get through high school? So like, I'm like, I'm crushed, man. Like, cause now it's like, golly, I thought I had a plan. Now I don't again. And he's like, are you sure you're not colorblind? I said, man, I'm telling you, I'm not. He's like, look, go see an eye doctor and see if you can pass. So sure enough, went saw an eye doctor, went back to MEPS. Doc let me retake the test and I passed. And
how common is something like that?
For a waiver or like where something's medically they're not
medically not cleared. And especially if it could be, I don't want to call it wrong, but I mean it was wrong per se.
On that part of it being wrong, I don't know. Like I can't even tell you. And I've worked in recruiting for 10 years, right? I've never had anybody that's gone, no, man, I'm not colorblind, but they told me I'm colorblind, and then they go back. Now, medical stuff, yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, we deal with that all the time, right? I mean, people have had asthma, ADHD. I mean, especially now the system what we use, and how we do recruiting and how MEPS, can look at medical records. I mean, it's most people have. It's not uncommon to have anything, but there's waivers out there, and it's paperwork, and it's I think it scares some people off at times, like, oh, I got to do this. And it is a waiting game sometimes, because it does take time, but we're also trying to make sure you're physically fit,
exactly.
And that you're going to be able to feel your commitment, I guess. So, I literally went and like I said, I sit down and then I didn't even know what I wanted to do in the military. They didn't even talk jobs with me. And I'm like, man, what am I going to do? And, so I'm like, I'm just trying to figure it out, man, but it comes down and I'm like, I almost became a boat operator and I didn't even know the Army had boats at the time. Right. And the Army's got all kinds of boats. And I'm like, dude, there's only 3 places where you could be stationed at the time, Panama, Hawaii, and Virginia Beach. And I'm thinking,
those all 3 sound pretty nice.
Pretty nice. Right. But now keep in mind, but I'm like, there's no rodeo in Panama. There's, so I'm like, it's here and there. And I'm like, I don't know. And, but I'd always had, the thing I always had a passion for was, was aviation. I liked aviation and, thought about, maybe I want to be a pilot someday. I didn't know, and when I thought about it in high school, that was kind of the plan. Do I want to be a helicopter pilot? And, but I knew I didn't want to do 6 years at the time, right? Because when you're 18, right, and they tell you 6 years, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Now at 45, I look back and I'm like, 6 years is nothing.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation, right?
I think it's been what? How many years have I been out of high school?
You graduated 16?
17. So 8 years or 7 years?
7 years,
7 years. So it goes fast.
Right. And I met you when you were a sophomore, in high school recruiting, so. But yeah, so what happened was, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at all these jobs, right? And, my mom and dad are, they told me, they're like, listen, whatever you do, just, and don't take this the wrong way, man. I love my combat arms guys, right? But they were just go get something you can take to the outside world, and that made sense to me, right? Like why I didn't want to be an infantry guy. I didn't, and it's not me, nothing against, like I said, nothing against those guys, like whoever's listening to this, like don't take that the wrong way, but that wasn't me, right? I just, I'm not a big camper. I like the outdoors, but I don't like camping. Like, you want to go out, you want to go to the park, or you want to go out to the woods, you want to go hike all day, I'll go do that. I wanted something that I could fall back on. Right. And so I was like, what about aviation? As I'm sitting in MEPS, and they're like 6 years. I'm like, no way. And so the guy asked me, the MEPS guidance counselor just asked me, he's like, what do you think, man? Like, if I can get you aviation for 4 years, will you take it? And I only wanted to do 3. And I was like, you know what? Yeah. You give me what I want. I'll give you what you want. Right. Like it's 1 for 1. Yeah. Next thing I know, man, he's telling me I've got a 2-year enlistment on active duty and then 2 years in the Guard or Reserve. And I'm like, holy cow. So, next thing I know, man, I'm on a plane headed to basic training and started my military career back then in 99 and went to basic, and then got very fortunate, got stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and didn't know much about, we'd vacation there, right? But,
right.
So I was pretty excited about that. And found out that there was a lot of bull ridings in North Carolina, and there was a lot of rodeos in North Carolina, and the treadways are from down there. There's a lot of, Southern Rodeo Association, the IPRA, and Southern Pro Bull Riders at the time. And so it was like, man, I hit the jackpot, right? So I was basically in the Army, and I was doing my job, working on aircraft during the week. And then I was, going out to these rodeos and was having some success and really started to, because I finally had money to go, right? I could consistently get on, right? And I had some buddies I was going with, and was, just kind of having the time of my life. And, but, next thing I know, like, there's a military rodeo association. That's all for all military. I didn't know nothing about this. So I jump in this, and it's, called the Professional Armed Forces Rodeo Association, right? It's still around today. And, so next thing I know, I'm like, I'm going to do this. Well, next thing, now I qualify for the finals, and the finals are in New Mexico, right? And so I ended up winning that deal in 2000, and so I'm kind of like, man, this is nuts, right? I'm really having a good time. I'm riding bulls, and to be honest with you, man, like I'd gotten engaged on active duty. A lot of people don't know that. Some, my closer friends do, and I think looking back on it, right, I was homesick. I was looking for family, and it ended up not working out, thankfully, like it's in the long run, nothing against that against her. I won't say her name or anything, but it didn't work out, and, which was, a blessing in disguise at the time. And so, I was pretty well set. I was going to go back to college, and I was going to go rodeoing. And actually, I wasn't even sure I was going to go to college. I ended up I thought maybe I'd go to horse shoeing school. So I did that for a bit, and decided to go back to Wyoming, went back to the ranch, and, for the summer. And I still really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I was doing the Guard thing. And so I'm doing the Guard thing. And then, I come back from Wyoming, and a couple of days after I get back from Wyoming, man, like I'm literally not even home a week. And I'm living with my parents, like, sleeping on the couch. I don't even have a bed, because I'm like a boomer. My mom calls me a boomerang child, right? Like, she throws me out and I just keep coming back. Like, she can't get rid of me. And so I'm sitting there at the house, and phone rings. It's, I'm sleeping on the couch. It's 8:00 in the morning. My dad, he's like, hey man, he's like, the job you're looking for? He goes, you may not be looking for a job. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, turn on the TV. And I turn on the TV, and I'm like, what's going on? And I start flipping the channels, right? It's on every channel. It didn't hit me. Of course, it's 9/11. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there watching 9/11, and I'm like, oh man, wow, this is nuts, right? Like, especially being in the military, you're 20, I'm 22, 23 years old, and, like, you don't know what's going on. And it's funny now, I didn't realize the effect that event, that day, was going to have on my military career, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, that's kind of how I ended up in the military. I know we've kind of gone down. It's hard to just say, well, this is why, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everything had worked together. But yeah, man, it was, ended up 9/11 happened. And then, kind of how I ended up staying here, to be honest with you, is I was doing the Guard thing, right? I'd gone back to school at Ohio State, right? I was using my GI Bill. I was working at FedEx Ground, and I was doing enough, right, I was doing enough in school to get my money so I could go rodeo, right? Because I still had this dream. And, I was going to a bunch of open rodeos, local rodeos, some Miami shows, some IPRA rodeos, but I mean, the dream was like, I want to go to the PRCA.
Right.
I want to go to the PRCA. And the PBR it was around, but it was just kind of coming on. There wasn't, it wasn't like it is today, and I grew up watching PRCA rodeos, right? Las Vegas, the national finals. I mean, when I tell you I was obsessed, man, I was telling my kids this story the other night. I was like, you didn't have the guide on TV, right? You got the newspaper on Sunday and it was the book for the week, right? And I'm scanning it every night and I'm highlighting, setting a VHS tape, right? For ESPN, like, the George Michael Sports Machine, when Lane Frost and Red Rock go against challenge champions. And, so as a kid, I was just, like I said, I was obsessed. And, so, I was going through college and things had kind of kicked off after 9/11, obviously in Iraq, Afghanistan, but I hadn't gotten called. So I hadn't gotten a phone call. And, so I was like, all right, like this is, whatever I'm going to go to school and I'm going to rodeo. And, 2005, I got transferred units from Columbus. I'm a Chinook mechanic by trade, but we didn't have Chinooks at the time. So I was working Blackhawks down in Columbus and I'd reclassed and, Ohio got Chinooks, right? And they're like, well, you're the only qualified guy in the state at the time, right? It doesn't take long to get other guys qualified, but like I was the only one.
The only actual one.
Right. Because we just hadn't had them, so nobody needed to be qualified. So I get moved to Canton to the unit and I'm up there and got to be friends with some of the guys. And, and I'll be honest, it was kind of a rough transition at times in the beginning, right? Because all of them guys have been together, right? That's the great thing about the Guard, man. Like, you're with the same dudes, man. Back then, and even now, right? It's,
similar like a football team. That's, you spin like a college football team. You live together, you eat together, you sleep together. Like you're around each other so much that you kind of build this bond of almost, literally brothers in arms is what they call them. So it's like, it makes sense.
Yeah. And the guard was just so different from the active side, right? Mm-hmm. Because the active side guys are always coming in and going out, right? You're transferring duty stations. So you have guys and there is that camaraderie, right? Because most of you live in barracks, but the Guard's way different. I mean, some of these guys have served 15, 20 years together. Yeah. They came in the Guard together. They've been in the same unit, whatever. So it was, to transfer units, like I just didn't know anybody, and so it was a little, hard in the beginning, because it was very different, right? I mean, our unit was actually split. Half and was in Columbus, half was in Canton, but I didn't know the Canton guys. They didn't know me, but we had the same first sergeant, and he knew me and he liked me. So 2005, man, Katrina hits, and I get a call. I get to go to Katrina. I get to help out on that, and did that, but. While I'm down there, they start talking to me about applying for a job, like with a Guard full time as a technician. Like, hey man, we're gonna have a job opening. What do you want to do? We'd like you to apply. And I'm like, all right. By this point, I'm 27, and I'm like, man. So I tell them, I said, look, if the job opens before school starts, I'll apply. But if I go back to college, I'm getting out, man. Yeah. I got a year left. I'm done. Like I've done my time. I've done my 8 years. It's been great, but I'm getting out of the Guard. And so sure enough, job never opens up. I go back to OU. And by this point in time, I guess I should have said that I'm back in school, right? I'd been at Ohio State, left Ohio State, and transferred to OU. And I was a sports marketing management major, right? Because I thought, hey, I'm going to take this and I'm going to apply it somewhere in the rodeo business, right? That's what I wanted to do, right? Like it always, you notice that there's a common theme. Yeah. Everything always circled back to this one thing. And so I thought that's what I was going to do. I was convinced. And it doesn't open. I get back to school, man. It's like 2-3 weeks into the semester, and my phone rings, and it's one of the guys. It's my first sergeant. He's like, hey, that job's open. You got to apply. I said, I am not applying for this job. So I told you, man. I was like, I'm 27. I got to do something with my life. I mean, I've been screwing off. I mean, I'm running around. I'm just living the best life I can live. But eventually, my buddies are like graduating college, got real jobs in construction, right? I'm still kind of somewhat boomeranging it back to mom and dad's house, and so I don't apply for the job. My buddy calls me an hour later. He's like, dude, you got to apply for the job. I said, I told you. He's like, I know. I told him. I mean, you're not doing it. You're not going to do it. And so I didn't apply for the job. And so a couple weeks go by, and it's probably February, and I mean, so this is 2005, so we're at the height of it, man. It's kicking in Iraq, it's kicking in Afghanistan for them guys. And, I'm watching guys deploy, right? And there's part of me, right? It's kind of like, man, you kind of feel like you got to go, right? But I'm just like, they didn't call my number, right? Like, so is that my fault? Whatever. And, so I'm literally, I can even tell you it's a Monday. It's Monday. I get a phone call. Hey, units being activated. We're going to Iraq. We're taking volunteers right now. We only need 40 people. Do you want to go? I'm like, no. Right. And that was a deal I'd made with my parents, right? Like my parents said, if you get called, you go, but don't volunteer to go. Right. Inside I wanted to volunteer, right? Cause it's right. It's an adrenaline, right? It's the unknown. It's here we go. Like, you're invincible, right? You want to be part of it, and I say that, it's funny when I say that, cause like I'm an aircraft mechanic. I'm probably and I'm not even in a flight company. I'm in a maintenance company. So we're not even leaving the base. So like, it's way different for me than an infantry guy that, is out there, on the front lines every day.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, we'll let you know. They call me back on Friday. And they're like, hey man, pack your stuff. You're going to Iraq, and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting out, man. And they're like, no, you're not. You're involuntary extended. You're stop loss. And this is when stop loss was a thing, and I'm like, what do you mean I'm stop loss? And they're like, well, yeah, you can get out when you get back. And I'm like, son of a gun, like son of a bitch. Like, so like, I'm kind of in shock, right? Like, okay. But then the part of me is like, hells yeah. Right. Because one, I want the adventure of it. And I know the money, is right. For me at 26, right? Like I'm single. I got no kids. I got no responsibilities. And I'm looking at like, hey man, I'm going to make $4,000 a month. What do you spend it on? And it's tax free because at this point I'm 27, and I'm like, I know what I want to do. Right. But I haven't been able to do it because I don't have a pot of money. Right. Like, so I'm saying, I'm like, this is the deal. And, so like go down, I'm in the middle of actually it was quarter at school, and I'm in the middle of quarter, tell my parents, I'm like, hey, I'm leaving, been dating my wife 6 months, and it's funny now looking back because when we first started dating, I told her, I was like, I'm in the military. I was like, this may happen. If you don't want to deal with it, tell me now, we can go apart, like whatever. But I was like, I don't think it'll ever happen. Like it's not going to happen,
if it hasn't happened at this point.
Right. And, so we go to the first meeting as we're getting ready to go. And my first sergeant walks up and he's like, hey man, take a walk with me. I'm like, all right. I'm like, what's up? And he's like, man, he's like, hey, what are you going to do now that you're not going to be in school? I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'll finish school when I get home, I guess. I don't know. He's like, well, I got another job opening. He's like, you interested? And I'm kind of like, and I didn't say anything, but I kind of felt like, man, did you, like, and I kind of had like, did you do this on purpose? Like, and I kind of asked him one time, I was like, because they picked who was going, and there was other people, and I got picked, and I said, did you pick me on purpose? And I'm glad he did now, right, man, it was, but he was like, he never admitted to it or not, but it was just kind of one of those things. So I applied for the job and, obviously went to Texas for 6 months for training. And then we did 11 months in Iraq with a maintenance company working on helicopters, and came home and had a full-time job waiting on me. And it was, making $10,000, $15,000 more. I was going to finish college. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And so I did that. And then, I guess I'm kind of telling you my life story, right? Like that's
how this podcast always goes.
I don't know if it's boring or not, but it's, so I get back and, or I get to Iraq, and this is, because this is probably the funniest story or a funny story I'm going to tell, because like I told you earlier, my daughter says you have to be funny on a podcast, advice of an 11-year-old. But, so, we get deployed to Iraq, and I get over there, and all of a sudden I got to re-enlist, right? Like, because I got this job, I'm going to re-enlist. We'll find out I'm getting $20,000 bonus. And I'm like, man, I'm getting all this money. I'm getting $20K bonus. Man, I'm like, cool. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this? And, my bull riding days, right? Like, I tell people all the time, at this time, by this point in time, I had bought my pro card. I'd filled my permit, and I kind of skipped over that, but I kind of made the switch and but I wasn't killing it, right? I was going to some PRC rodeos and some First Frontier Circuit rodeos, which were good little rodeos, but I wasn't making a living doing it, right? And I just wasn't talented enough, I wanted to be, as much as you want it, I couldn't mentally. I struggled with the mental aspect of it, right? I'd get on a hot streak, I'd ride really good, and then I wouldn't. And then
similar to, it's almost like, sounds like baseball and softball, like with hitting, like, because you can go, it's a lot of it's mental, and you can go in these slumps to where if your mental state stays that way, you almost carry that through the next ride or the next, your next at bat.
Without a doubt, but when like I gotta win,
yeah,
like so I have enough money to keep going, and then you don't, and it was tough, but so I get this idea, like, I'm 27. I'm never going to have this kind of money. I'm going to buy me some bucking cows. That's what I'm going to do so I can stay in this. And now looking back, I'm like, there was no plan. There was no business plan. There was no, honestly, mom and dad didn't even have a farm. So I don't even know
That's what I was going to ask is, where's it going?
At that point in time, I was kind of a free spirit, man. I was just kind of like, I was like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. Like, I was like, I'll figure it out. And everybody's like, where are they going? I was like, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And so I bought a cow from a guy out of Texas, Alvin Jones. And I got one cow, and we leave for Iraq, and I start getting this money, right, man. And it's rolling in, and I'm like, now I got nothing to spend it on, right? Like, I got one day off a week. If that, I'm rolling down to the PX when I have free time. I'm buying like 5 movies. Man, I came home with a case of movies, like that's all I'm watching. You're watching all kinds of movies. You don't care what it is. It's something. And I'm working second shift. And so, man, I'm in the internet trailer because, we don't have it. I didn't have internet in my room, and I'm in the internet trailer, and I'm just on all these rodeo sites, man. And I'm just auction sites, and that's all I'm doing from Iraq. I'm researching, right? Because I can't ride bulls. I can't do anything. That's my only connection to home. Right. I'm talking to mom and dad. I'm talking to, at the time I'm talking to my wife, but I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I call a guy, find these bulls and these cows in Texas. And I call a guy and his name's Casey Yates. His brother's Colby Yates, been to the NFR and the PBR finals. And a lot of people know who Colby is, but I call him up and I'm like, hey man, like these cows still for sale. And he's like, he's talking to me, we're talking about it, and he has no idea what's going on. He's got no idea. And he has no idea that it's 2:00 in the morning, and I'm literally at a base 35 miles north of Baghdad.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm, next thing I know, man, the siren goes off. Incoming. Because we're getting mortared, right? It happens all the time. Where we're at, the nickname was Mortaritaville. And so we're getting mortared, like the 5th time that day. And so, of course, they shut down the phones. I'm like, hey, man, I'll have to call you back. And so I call him back, and, like an hour later, and he's like, dude, what was that? And I'm like, well, there's more to my story than what I told you. So I was like, can you hang on? He's like, yeah, I'll check on the price of them cows, and either my brother's, I'll let you know what he wants for him. And I'm like, okay. He's like, I'll just call you back tomorrow. I was like, well, you can't call me back. I was like, earlier that siren you heard, like, man, I'm in the military. I'm 35 miles north of Baghdad. There's no way to call me back. I got to call you. He's like, so he stops, like dead silence. He's just like, he goes, so let me get this straight. You're in the middle of Iraq in a war zone, and you're calling me to ask about some cows? I go, yeah, man, sure am. Of course, we've talked about it. I haven't talked to Casey in a long time, but at the time we talked about it when we got back. But I was like, hey, man, it's, it is what it is, right? Find a way, right? That's grind, find a way, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of this stuff later on too. But that's always been my mentality.
I was going to say that seems like it's carried through your entire life is find a way. I like that because it's like, there's always been different kind of almost speed bumps or things that kind of got in the way, but you still found a way, and like the boomerang thing. And so you found a way back home too. But like, there's always a path. It just may not be, it's not always the straight path that everyone thinks it is.
Yeah. And it's right. And I had a young soldier a couple years ago ask me, they're like, hey man, you seem to be doing good for yourself, right? You got a nice house, you got, you got a nice truck, like, how'd you do it? And I'm like, dude, you just got to grind. right? And I think that's where people don't want to grind anymore, right?
No. Yeah, it's getting bad.
Right? You gotta want to grind. Like you gotta find. We tell our kids all the time, you gotta find your why, right? What's your why, right? So to me, Iraq, my why was like, I'm serving my country, I'm doing my deal, but my why is this is another thing. So, and we can get in that in a second, but I want to finish this. So I buy these cows, and he tells me what they're going to cost. I say, cool, I'll take them. Can you hold them for 90 days? Because this is spring, I'm coming home. Still have no plan where they're going. I've had no conversation with anybody. And I call my dad. He's handling my fine. I'm like, hey, listen, I need you to send a check, to Texas for this amount of money. Dad's like, sure will. Dad sent a check. I mean, we're buying breeding semen, man. We got an account set up at Champion, this place called Champion Genetics, and we're buying bull semen and we're buying cows, but we got no farm, man. Like,
how many cows did you buy?
I bought 5.
Okay. But still nowhere to put them.
Nowhere to put them. I bought 5. I bought 5 mama cows, with nowhere to put them. So you talk about putting the cart ahead of the horse. Like, we didn't even know the horse. We just got a cart. And so luckily, we start. I get back and a buddy of mine's got them, and some friends of ours had a piece of property, and they were like, "Hey man, we're not doing anything. You want to put them here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, that's awesome. Like, this is cool, right?" Like, so we put them there, and but it was really limited, right? It's not a big place. You can't do much with it, but it solved my problem, right? But the second problem I got now is the cows are in Thornville. I'm living in North Canton.
Oh.
So here's my poor dad who gets suckered into, hey, welcome to the bull business. You're going to help with this, And so we're doing that, and I'm coming home on the weekends and getting things set up, and I'm doing what I can, but I'm trying to work up there. Stace and me are at this point engaged, right? Like, we got engaged when I came home on a mid-tour leave from Iraq, and that was just one of those by luck kind of things, like that. It's funny how like life works out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the day I met Stace, I went to play golf and went to Texas Roadhouse, and a girl that I knew introduced me to her, right? So, at that point in time, it was like, if we can get through this, we can get through anything. We got this thing going on, right? Me and Stace are engaged, and we got engaged, because I figured, man, we can get through a deployment, we can get through anything, right? Like, and it was rough. I mean, it was hard at times, right? I didn't know, like, is she going to be there in a year, whatever. So, I'm living in Canton. She's working up in Columbus. My dad's taking care of the cows. Like, it's chaos, man. And so we get married, and I got these cattle, but I still ain't got nowhere to put them. And so we're trying to figure this out, and this goes on for like a year and a half, right? And my father-in-law ended up taking them for a while, which, great. The person we're keeping out, they decided to move. They moved to Missouri. I'm like, oh shit, what do we do here, right? Like, and I didn't know enough about like a home loan or anything to buy a house. So we're renting this apartment, right? And it's on a golf course, and like, so it's like, I'm living like in the suburbs, but I'm like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, and I started talking to a buddy of mine, and he's just like, it's kind of like my work wife, right? We spent more time together over 3-4 years. We'd gone to Katrina, we deployed together, and it was kind of like a big brother to me, right? Yeah. And Scott Job's his name, but I mean, he was just, for whatever reason, man, right? Like when I first met him, I didn't like him. I remember literally, we're getting ready to go to Katrina. I met him, and I'm dealing with him, and I'm like, this dude's a dick. Like, I go to our first sergeant, I'm like, you can't expect me to go to Katrina with this dude, right? Just arrogant, cocky. He's E6, I'm an E5. I'm like top. Like, come on, man. This guy's gonna make this trip miserable, right? Funny thing is when I'm not around, he goes to the first sergeant too and says, "You can't take this young, arrogant son of a bitch with you," right? So we get to, but we got to know each other at Katrina, and we found out we had a lot of interest, right? Man, he'd rode bucking horses back in the day, and they showed quarter horses, and so he starts telling me, he's like, dude, you got to buy a house, man. Like, you're going to have to. I'm like, man, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to buy a house. I'm 28 years old, but I mean, I'm like I said, man, I've been just, living
I'm 26 and still have never actually bought a house
Right.
personally. So yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is I just never, I was just kind of living the thing, you
Yeah.
know? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to buy a house. I don't know what I want to do. Like, maybe I don't want to do this, you know, maybe I don't want to stay in the military. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the best advice he ever gave me, you know, at that point in time was, you know, and it was kind of an eye opener. And he goes, at some point, you're going to have to stop doing what you want to do and start doing what you have to do.
Oof. Yep.
At 28, man, that hit home, right? But it also, I was like, yeah, you're right. I got, you know, like it hit, like I got responsibilities. Like I got these cows. I can't depend on everybody else. Like I made the choice. I bought them. I gotta find a way, right? Find a way, right?
Yep.
Find a way. So next thing I know, man, I come home and I tell Stacy, I said, we're buying a house. She goes, well, we can't afford a house. Now, granted, she's just finished up. She might even have still been in grad school, right? So she's, you know, her nurse practitioner, she's finishing up. And I'm like, we're buying a house. She's like, again, I'm like, no, VA, you don't have, you know, I'm telling her how we're going to do this. She's like, no, she's like, I don't know. I said, listen, here's how it's going to go. We're buying a house. You can either be involved or I'm going to go buy a house. Like, I got to get the cows up here. Like, I got to figure out a way. And so we start looking, man. And we finally find a house, and it's 5, you know, and it's a small property. It's 5 acres, right? And with rodeo cows, like, you know, a lot of your calves and that are kept in pens, so they don't, you know, your bulls and they're not just free run around. And like I said, I had 5 mama cows at the time, and we buy this, and all of a sudden, man, I got a 5-acre pasture and a house. I got no barn. I got no fence. I got nothing, but I got land now.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, you know, what am I going to do? So we, you know, ended up hired a buddy of mine, my grandmother, fortunate enough she helped me out, you know, and we built the barn, and I spent whole winter designing this. Like, this is how I want the barn, how I want it to work, and this is how the fields. And then, you know, luckily, you know, family, man, just, you know, brother-in-law came up, brings a tractor, post driver, right? Helps me drive all the posts. And then it was just like every night, man, I'm just doing something, right? For an entire summer. It was like, it kept going on. And it's just like, get this piece done. You know, buddies are helping me out. And next thing I know, we got it. And so next thing I know, I got cows and I got a place and I'm finding a way. And, you know, that kind of led to that. And then, you know, so we were there for about 7 years, man, just, you know, working aircraft, and had our first 2 kids when we were up there. And, you know, but, you know, we talk about the military, like I just kind of got tired of working on aircraft. It was just, if you haven't realized, you know, through what I've told you, I'm always looking for something new, right? Like I can't do stuff for, you know, whatever I get bored with it, right? It's like, I need a new challenge, right? Like, and, but I you know, I'd had enough, right? I'd crewed aircraft and I was tired. I didn't want to do that. And, you know, and I really just kind of came down to, like, cause I was a civilian, and I'm like, man, I'm 20, you know, 30 years old. I can't do this for 30 more years. Right. Cause I knew, like, I, you know, treated my body like crap. It's, you know, basically like an old honky tonk bar, and just, you know, from rodeoing and high school sports and, you know, all the other dumb stuff I've done, like, just, you know, I didn't think I was going to make it to 60, you know. To be honest, I joke with people all the time. I'm like, I didn't think I was going to live past 35. And there was probably some truth to that, right? Man, there was a point I was just going. It was going out of control. Like, you know,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Been there, done that.
Right. And the problem was this went on for like 10 years.
Mine didn't do that, but
you know, so, you know, we're working up there, and I'm like, man, I gotta go. Like, I can't do this. And got the idea I was going to join the Coast Guard, man. I was going to leave the Army, go to the Coast Guard. Why? I don't know. I guess, you know, my wife loves the beach, right? But I'm like, that's not going to help my cause with these cows and what I want to do, right? Like, it was, the beach is great for vacation, but I'm going to be miserable in 6 months. And so I called a buddy of mine, and you know, who's always looked out for me, right? Always giving me good career advice, man. Ron Schuler, man, great dude. He was a warrant officer, and one of the first guys I met when I came to the Guard. And he's, you know, still talk to him today, right? He sends me texts and stuff, and we still talk. And And this dude, man, just for whatever reason, man, took a liking to me, right? And he's always giving me sound advice, and I call him up. I'm like, Ron, I was like, listen, man, I like being in the military, right? But I'm like, I don't know if I can do this for 30 more years. But I never finished college. I now I got 2 kids. Like, I need a new challenge. What do I do? And he's like, well, you want to become a recruiter? And I'm like, no, man, no way. Like, you gotta be kidding me, right? Like, I'm like, but I'm not against it either. Like, part of me is like, no way, right? Because what if I'm not good at it, right?
Just had an episode about this, me and my buddy. I don't know if you ever remember Dante.
Yeah.
So me and Dante recorded other episodes called Beyond the Surface, and we just had a conversation about this with the whole thing of I just started, my own business with the videography side of things, and doing work for the Ohio Stingrays and other things. And I've had a few new opportunities arise that they're not like set in stone or anything. And we just had this conversation about how I told him I was like excited and nervous about all this at the same time, because there's always that little bit of self-doubt in the back of your head of like, yeah, it'd be cool. I think I'd like doing it, but like, would I be good at it? And we just had a whole episode about it. It's Beyond the Surface number 4. Actually, I think it came out the Friday before this episode was released. It comes out this Friday from when we're recording. So, yeah.
And that, that was, I was scared to death, right, man? Because, we had recruiters there, right? I knew it was hard, right? Recruiting's not easy, right? And it's, there's a lot that goes into it, right? I think there's, like I said, preconceived notions about what the military is and who it is. And, you gotta commend, you gotta talk to parents, right? Like you gotta, hey, we're going to look out for the best interest of your child. And
look at your parent, your mom, and
right.
They always essentially did their own interview on the interviewee.
Right. So it was, but I was like, oh man, I can talk, but I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, hey man, I'm like, Chief, I don't know, man. And I always called Ron Schuler. He was the chief horse, so I always called him Chief. And I'm like, Chief, I don't know, man. He's like, look, dude, you got the best of both worlds. He's like, you're a federal technician. If you go on orders, they got to hold your job. At the time, they got to hold your job for 5 years. So if this doesn't work out, you can just go back to that. And I'm like, now I'm listening, right? Like, hey, let's give this a run. So I talked to my wife and we interviewed, and so everything went well. And then, next thing I know, they're offering me, hey, you're going to Mansfield. I'm like, oh, man, I don't want to go to Mansfield. But I'm like, I got to get my foot in the door. So, like, I'm going to Mansfield. And then it's, no, you're not going to Mansfield. There's not an opening there. We're going to send you here. And this goes on and on and on. They finally call me and they're like, hey, you're going to Newark. Like, and I'm like, sweet. When do I start? And it's like 5-10 days. Well, at the time, my wife, like, we're living in Canton. We have a house. At this point in time, we've got, 7 or 8 mama cows and 8 or 9 yearling bulls running around, and so there's the farm to think about, right? Like, I just can't up and leave. And then my wife is like, my youngest daughter is literally less than 2 months old, and my oldest is 2. And I'm like, this doesn't happen, like, plus where am we going to live? Right. Yeah. Like, we got family here. Right. But I'm like, so I call him, I'm like, I can't do this, not on short notice. Like, and, so we actually came home that weekend and, we're telling the family, like, yeah, we had a chance to come back home and whatever. And so we came home or they're telling us, like, hey, if you guys need a place to stay, you guys can stay here. My wife's parents, my in-laws, they have quite a big house, and their kids were graduating and moving out, and their younger set of kids. And so, I'm like, are you guys sure? And so they're like, yeah, and so I call them back and I said, look, are you guys going to reboard, like, call a board, right? You go and it's an interview. You're going to interview for this job. I'm interested, right? Because now I'm thinking, man, I missed my chance. Like, this is a chance to go home, like, or home in the area, right? Like, home, like, Sheridan, northern, Perry County's home, but Licking Valley is home for my wife. And so we're like, but we get back to the area, close to family, friends. And, Canton wasn't my cup of tea, right? It's just like where we lived at, we weren't in Canton, we were out in the country, but it was, man, it's a snow belt. It's always cloudy. Like, it just, I didn't like it, and There's just something about people down in this area. They're just a little different, like in a good way, right? Like so I called back and said, "You guys gonna reopen this job?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Sweet, I'm applying." I was like, "When is the board?" They're like, "Oh man, it's gonna be next month." I'm like, "Cool, I got plenty of time to get my affairs in order." So I apply everything, I get hired. And man, I'm like, "Cool, I got hired." Well, I think it's just gonna be that quick to come down and find a house, right? Well, we got to sell ours, and that is not going well. Our real estate agent is like, whatever. I don't know what was going on, but he's telling us, like, "I'm going to sell this house in 3 weeks." I'm like, "Sweet, you're going to sell in 3 weeks? Like, let's do this." He don't sell it. Well, I got to come, right? I got to go. So I'm living down here in the week. Got my wife and the kids up in Canton or around North Canton and the farm. And I got, buddy's taking care of the farm. He's like, "Dude, I can't do this all the time." And it's about an hour's worth of work a night, at least. And so I had to make the decision, like, what am I going to do? So I called some buddies and got them to take the better cows in the herd, that were better bloodline. And I had a real, some yearling bulls that I'd bucked that showed some promise. But the sacrifice to get home was we had to put that on hold. And I loaded them all up in a trailer, man. It was hard. I was telling a buddy at work today about this story, and I hauled them, loaded them up, drove them over to the livestock and sent them to slaughter.
Damn. Yeah. That almost kind of, I feel like, goes back a little bit to you got to do instead of doing what you want to do, you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not, that's the thing too. It's not always an easy thing to do. It's not like people, like when we say that, it's not necessarily like it's going to be the super easy path just to take. It's sometimes tough decisions like that of sacrificing something and in doing that. You don't have the choice necessarily.
Yeah. And I think what it came down to it was, right, like it sucked, right? Like, here's my dream, right? Mm-hmm. This is I've scratched, clawed, I've done this weird path of all these different ways to get to this spot. But I also realized that it was better for my kids. It was better for my wife. Like, let's go home. Like, I wanted my kids to know my parents, right? I wanted them to be around there. I knew we were going to need help from family eventually, right? With sports or if a kid's sick or whatever. And so that was the sacrifice we made, So, and at the time it was okay, right? Like, because I was like, I still got the 4 or 5 main cows. Like, we'll rebuild. We'll just start over. Like, it just puts us back. And come home and end up living with the in-laws for 22 months because we just couldn't find a place. Like, what matched what we were looking for, right? Like, we could have found, there was plenty of houses, but like what we were, like, this is what we need. And
that's exactly what I'm going through right now. And me and my girlfriend, like, we're wanting to move, but it's one of those where like we're in the house we're in now, but we find some things, but it's like, I don't want to have to move again either necessarily. Like, hopefully this is where we stay, but also like, it's not exactly what I'm looking for. And I'm not spending net price if it's not exactly what I'm looking for at this point.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it was, and thankfully to my in-laws, like, they let us do that, man. But we're living at their house and next thing I know, man, it's, I'm in full blown in recruiting, right? So I'm down here for 6 months and my wife, kids are up there and I'm struggling, right? This is probably about the time I met you, right? Like, cause this is 2015, right? You're probably a sophomore.
Yep.
And, so I'm struggling, right? Like, I'm just like, man, this is hard. I called my wife. I remember calling her. I had gone and done 3 appointments, man. I was recruiting them in Knox County at the time. And I called her. I said, I can't do this. Right. Like, I just given up. Like, I was just like, it's so hard. Like, you thought it went so well and it didn't. And I was getting so frustrated. I remember I called a guy and I called to talk to his son and I shouldn't say this, but I mean, like, he literally, like, just tells me off. Like, how I'm the scum of the earth, right? His kid is like never joined the military, that he's he's better than that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's like, that hurt, right, man? Like, that's hard to hear, right? Because you're like, well, wait a minute, dude, right? Like, you're basically bashing on me, basically saying I'm scum of the earth. And
granted, you served, you went overseas, you helped at Katrina, like, you're the scum of the earth for trying to get other people to do things that you have done as well that help. You serve the country, so like
well, I think you got to understand. There's a reputation. I think there's a reputation with recruiters, right? Like they're shady. They're going to lie to you. Like I don't know. That's always. I hear. I mean, I hear it all the time, right? Like you're going to tell me what I want to hear, right? And
I could see that. It's no different than football coaches that you talk to. Like when I was getting recruited, same thing. Because the only military recruitment that I've ever think I had was you, so like I never had any of the other ones to compare to or anything like that. And you were a great recruiter, but I know talking to other football coaches and stuff, like you got there was some shady side to some of them.
Well, and I think for me, like I said, one, I had a really good recruiter, right? That was it. The other thing is I'm recruiting at home. These are my people, right? Like
you relate to them, you know the area, you understand how everything kind of works.
But you're going to see them, right?
Yeah.
And it's what I've often said. Like I don't want to recruit somebody and then be walking through the mall with my kids or out to dinner with my kids and run into somebody and they be like, flipping me the bird.
Right.
Now, like I tell people all the time though with recruiting, like, these are the benefits that are there. What you do with them, that's up to you.
Right.
I can't force you to go to college and get it paid for. I can't force you to take advantage of a VA home loan. I can't. I wish I could, right? I wish I could take that and force you to do it, but I can't. It's like anything, right? Like some people have they find out that maybe this, I shouldn't say that it's not for them, right? But it's, everybody's experience is different in the military, right? And so, it makes it hard, right? Like, and that's what made it hard in recruiting, right? Like when I got here, like I was saying, it was, you want to be honest, right? Because you're screwing people's lives.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, essentially, right? You're screwing with people's lives. Like, I mean, and I shouldn't say you're screwing with their lives because you're not screwing with them, but
it almost sounds like in a bad way, but it's not necessarily meant that way. Yeah.
Like if you're not doing your part or you're not doing the right thing by that kid, you are screwing with their life.
Yes.
Right. And it's, so it's like, you got to have a plan, right? We had to lay it out. We had to have a plan. Right. And man, I'll tell you, man, I'm going in and like I said, it's just not going well. When I called Stacy, I'm like, listen, I don't know if this house don't sell, maybe we want to just hang on to it for a little bit. We might be moving back here pretty soon. And, yeah, so, I'm like, we're going to, we'll figure this out, some way, somehow. But, I hadn't been to recruiting school or anything. So I go to recruiting school and I come back and I'm working for a guy, and this guy I'm working for, man, he's just like, he's intense. And I'm like, dude, this dude. And he just asked me one day, he's like, what do you need from me? And I'm like, I need you to leave me alone and let me do my thing. I'm like, if in 6 months I'm sucking at this, you can fire me. But I'm like, I just need, and he's like, smart aleck kid. And I'm like, I looked at it as I came from working on aircraft, right? And there was a cockiness about me, right? I'm 33, 34 years old. I was working on $26 million aircraft. I don't need this dude babysitting me. Like, I know this area. The recruiter that was here is failing as a recruiter, right? He's telling me nobody wants to join. They all want to get out of here. And I'm like, man, you're looking in the wrong place, right? So I'm just stirring the pot. And next thing I know, man, it just starts rolling. And like, things just start working and I didn't change anything. But what I did was I tried to build relationships with people, right? I was trying to build those relationships with, the school administrators, with, the students, right? And talking to you, like, I bet you how many times did we probably talk, you think, when you were still in high school before you ever joined? Or not before you joined, but before I ever mentioned you joining.
Multiple times. I mean, because you came and worked out the football team too. So, there was, I probably at least 5, 6, 7, like probably a lot more than I remember. But yeah, I mean, we built a relationship before the military was even brought up.
And I think that, for recruiters, I think that was one of the things that, we didn't, sometimes it's hard, right? because we have to ask that question. Do you want to join? That's our job, right? But you guys get it from every branch of service, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody, you know, and it's tough. And I had that conversation, you know, but my thing was always, you know, they're like, well, did you ask them who wants to join? No. They know what I do. They know why I'm here.
I'm in my uniform.
Right. You know, and at the time that, you know, it was different, you know, now it's not like, you know, probably like that as much, but, you know, I talked to you, and it you know, but it just seemed to start working. And I don't know why. Actually, I do know why, right? And it goes back to what we said. Find a way, right? Like that's always, you got to grind, right? And I got off to a hot start, man. You know, I start writing contracts, and I got people, you know, like all of a sudden they're like, you know, I'm putting people in the guard. People are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What's the magic secret? And I'm like, I'm outworking you. There is no magic secret. I mean, I can remember Stacy calling me at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. You all right? Yeah, I'm in the office. Do you know what time it is? Not a clue. And I was building a packet, right? I was like, I'll build packets at night when I can't talk to you. I'm going to do all my admin stuff in the middle of the night. Yeah. And I'm going to roll. But all day long, I'm just going to come here and I'm going to talk and I'm going to talk. And I think that's always kind of been my motto, right? Like, just find a way. Like, find a way. Find a way to get to what you want. What's your why? Why are you doing this? And find, you know, and grind. Just grind. Yeah. And, you know, and I think that's, you know, that's probably why I've had success. And I've had plenty of failures too, man. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you know, in some people's aspect, you know, when we talk about, you know, me riding bulls, some people look at me like, oh yeah, you were a failure at that. There's probably times I've like, oh, I should have taken it more serious. I should have done this. I should have done that, you know, but I didn't know. You know, but I also, you know, maybe didn't take advantage of some opportunities that were out there, right? Like, there were just things that I just didn't do. But it's always, you know, find a way. I think the other thing for me was always, I turned everything into a competition. I mean, I love to compete, right? I like, into a fault. I'm not going to lie to you. It's to a fault. You know, you've talked, obviously you've had Steve Kidwell on the show, and you've talked with Steve, and, you know, me and Steve coached together, and I'm sure Steve's told you, like, I'm hard on my kids when it comes to sports, you know, and it's not about winning to me for them. I could care less if they win. I could care less if they play, but if we're going to play, we're going to grind.
Right.
We're all in. Like, there's no like, oh, this is like, you know, I'm going to give you every opportunity to be successful, but you got to take care of it. But
I see it all the time it drives me nuts because, like, I do videography for a lot of sports, and when I'm doing it, like, you know, I'm a competitive kid. I love sports and I know sports enough. Even though I don't know softball, I know it enough that I can watch and be like, you're not trying as hard as you can. One, it's maybe a camp that your parents are paying for you to be here. So take advantage of this opportunity. It drives me nuts. Like, why are you even here then? Like, I'd rather you just not play. Like, if you're not going to put in the effort.
Well, and I think it's, you know, we talk about youth sports, right? Because I have my own theories on youth sports, right? I you know, being a softball, you know, coaching girls softball, and, you know, I've coached, you know, rec ball, and I've helped coach football, and, you know, youth sports, I mean, it's so different now, right, than when I played. You know, and granted, that's, you know, that's been 30 years ago, right? 40 years ago, right? It's just different, right? But I mean, we didn't go to specialized coaches for anything.
No, I went my senior year for speed training. That was it. And it was more mainly like speed and agility. Right. And it wasn't, but like, I was still lifting on my own to put in that extra work. Like, there was a lot of work I was doing outside of just like the team lifts and the work that I did with the trainer once a week. There, like, I've never seen, nowadays everybody's got a hitting coach, everybody's got a pitching coach, everybody's got a football, like, everybody has their specialized training, and right. That didn't exist. It wasn't as common even when I was in high school. It wasn't as common.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we talk about that though, right? Like, and I'm not saying it's wrong, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
yeah.
I got kids. I got a daughter in basketball and plays AAU, and she goes for basketball training. I got a daughter that plays softball, right? And she goes, you know, for hitting lessons or
I wish I
or
kind of, part of me wishes that those were more readily available when I was in school, because I'm looking at it going, what could have happened if I did have like specialized training for say at this?
Yeah. And I'm the same way. Right. And to be honest with you, like we probably couldn't afford it growing up.
Same. Yeah, exactly.
Not that we were poor, but
yeah,
it just
specialized training isn't cheap either.
Right. But I mean, I'll be honest, like you probably, if you would have told somebody back in my day, like, I'm taking my kid to hitting coach, they all would have been like, you know what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I mean, you played baseball. Baseball was over. You threw all the baseball gear in the closet and you grabbed the football gear. Yep. You played football. When football was over, all that went away. You grabbed all the basketball and you concentrated, you know? So it's different, right?
Do you think there's more one sport athletes nowadays than there ever used to be?
Yes and no. I think on some aspects, yes. Right. Yeah. You know, we've always told our girls with the softball team, we want you to play multiple sports.
Right. That's what my high school Sev, that's what he always told us. He's like, I don't care what you go do, go play basketball, go run track, right. Go do something other than football. Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is right. Like you gotta, you listen to college coaches talk, right? Like, you know, and I've been fortunate to be around a lot of high school coaches. I've been around some college coaches, you know, in passing, or, you know, I've had opportunities to listen to Urban Meyer or you know, Ryan Day speak, or, you know, whatever, through at the Ohio High School Football Coaches Conference, or, you know, because the Guard has a program, right? The Operation Buckeye Guard program. And I've had that opportunity. You know, and a lot of them tell you, like, I want to see how he competes in another sport, right? For me, you know.
That make my Ohio Wesleyan coaches, they never watched me play at a football game. They never came and saw me play at a football game. They watched me play in a basketball game.
Right.
They wanted to see it. Now, granted, I fouled out, I think, in the third quarter, so I don't know if that helped or hurt my case.
I mean, you did play defense in college, right?
So it probably helped my case a little bit, because I was definitely, I'd like to say I was the most physical on our basketball team. I was one of two football players, I think. So like I was just different when it came to that physicality side of things. Yeah.
And I think for me anyway, you know, I want my kids to play multiple sports, right? You know, I got a daughter right now that's a gymnast, right? And she loves it. She puts a ton of time in. But it worries me, right? What if in 2 years she doesn't want to be a gymnast anymore?
Yeah.
You know, we miss volleyball season every year. We miss basketball season. Now she's playing high level softball, you know, or if you want to call it high level softball, Stingray softball, which is, you know, higher level softball, right? You know, she's playing that, you know, but it's, you know, how far is she behind on these other things? You know, right? Now, I don't think she's going to go anywhere with the gymnastics. I mean, she's been doing that, right? But there's things, you know, right now, like, you know, I don't have her going to lessons for softball because it's the beginning of gymnastics season, right? And we're getting ready to start competition season. And, you know, but I'm like, dude, pound for pound, man, she's strong, right? Like, you know, I take her to the fair and she walks over to a recruiting booth and they got a pull-up bar and she knocks out like 14 of them, right? And then these guys are like looking at her because, I mean, she's, you know, I mean, you've seen her. She's right. She's basically, I mean, I call her chicken legs because she's a beanpole and, you know, but, you know, she's just knocking them out rep for rep, right? Like, I could never do 15 pull-ups. Never on my best day I could have.
I think the most I got in college was 13.
Right. You know, and she's just like, it's nothing. You know, but that's because of other sports, right? She has that strength from volleyball or from gymnastics and, you know, the flexibility and those things. And so, you know, I'm all about it, right, man? Because I mean, it's like, let kids be kids, right? Let them go compete though, right? Like, cause that's what that's what I want out of my kids, right? Like, and I get so frustrated with them too, because like I said, like to me, like with recruiting was a competition. Hey, here's how many you got to write. You know, we want you to write this many. Right? Like it's a mission, right? And people are all like, oh, you guys have quotas. Listen, the Army's got missions for everything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, every boss is going to say, hey, you work in sales, you got to sell X amount of dollars.
Well,
this year.
Exactly. If you don't, then
you have set goals.
Like, then what do you could sell zero and then what changes then? Like, right. So like, yeah, you have to.
Right. You know, and, you know, obviously, you know, so it was like, but to me, it was a competition. Mm-hmm. And once I realized it was a competition, it was game on, man. And it was fun. And I loved recruiting, right? Because if you wrote 2, I wanted to write 3.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter to me so much about who wrote the most for the year. I just wanted to get the assigned mission done before you.
Right.
But I didn't want to just beat you by 1 or 2. Like we know every day. Like we have a spreadsheet tells who put in contracts and where people stand. Buddy, every day. That was the first thing I looked at every day. For the first 4 years I was in recruiting, that's what I looked at. Every day.
That's a good thing though, I feel like, because if it almost like fuels you a little bit at the same time, because you can see if you're behind, or you can see like, oh, I'm only ahead by like 1 or 2. That could easily today be changed. So like I think that's a great thing to look at.
Oh, without a doubt, man. I used it. I used it as motivation.
Right.
Man, I mean, first year I had a lot of success, right? And I'll be honest, I'm not saying I'm the best recruiter in the world, right? Don't take it that way. But during that time, I was having some success, right, man? I was the first recruiter to close 3 or 4 years in a row. And I can remember like a guy I ran into, he was a friend of mine, right? He was a recruiter up in Akron, on Akron U. He's like, this is my year. I'm gonna destroy you. And he did, man. He jumped out hot start. And I was like, no, put that in my brain. And I used that, right?
Yeah.
I remember my first year, I'm going to MEPS and I wrote a kid, and it was my last contract of the year. It was the last kid I wrote that year. And the guy makes a comment, right? He's like, well, we'll just see if you can do it again next year. Like real smart ass.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, plant that in my brain. Plant that in my brain. And it was, I found all these things that fueled me, right? And I didn't want to just beat you to the end. I wanted to beat you so bad that even if you were having a great year, you were still like, damn, I suck. Like that was the goal, right? I didn't want it to be any question of, oh, you got lucky because this happened, or this kid got sick and couldn't go to MAPS. No, I wanted it to be like, adios, man.
Yeah.
And I think the fastest I ever did was like 5 months, or 21 contracts in 5 months. Man, I was going. But the thing was I didn't have a problem talking with a freshman. I didn't have a problem talking with a sophomore. I didn't have a problem talking with a junior, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's like, oh, they don't waste your time with that kid. He, you can talk to him in 2-3 years. I just built that relationship. Do you know Ethan Pollock?
Yeah.
Ethan Pollock's a perfect example of that kid, man. I'm over at Watkins. I started talking to him as a freshman. He come up to the table, we set up at lunch, right? You're all staring at us. We're staring at you, that whole creepy thing. And I'm sitting there talking to, Ethan starts coming up, right? And he's like, I'm a freshman, man. And me and him just talked, right? We built a relationship, and, at the school, right? Hey, this is what the guard is. Here's, whatever. And, sophomore year comes, and, hey, man, what's up, man? Hey, it's junior year. Hey, what's up? And I remember senior year, man. First week of school. I'm at Watkins, man. Set up lunchroom, right? Here comes Ethan. He comes down the hall. And he's like, hey, Sergeant Mohler, what's up, man? I'm like, what's up, Ethan? I was like, what are we going to do, man? We going to join the military this year? And he just turned around and looked at me, and he stopped, and he's like, you guys still helping? You still paying 100% college tuition, on the GI or the National Guard scholarship? I said, yeah. He goes, call me tonight. I said, all right, man. I called him that night. Next day, man, I'm at his mom and dad's house, and a week later, he's in the military.
Wow.
Like, it was an easy conversation.
Yeah. But it's because you built that relationship up for 3-4 years leading up to that.
Yeah. And, I tell my young recruiters this all the time. Like, live in your schools, man. Just go hang out. Like, be there. Grind it out, right?
Yeah.
Like, find a way. They're like, well, they won't let me in. Well, find a way.
Yeah.
They don't trust you. They don't know you, right? Like,
that's the thing, too, is I wanted to speak on is like building. Not only are you building a relationship if you're talking to them, I feel like you have to build that trust up. Like you said, they kind of already have in their mind maybe what it is, but building that trust up, like you said, talking to Ethan as a freshman, sophomore, junior, working that trust and building that trust the entire way has got to be huge in terms of recruiting.
Yeah, and I think I think it is, right? One thing I'll tell you, like, things that you try to do that, right? You're trying to build that trust,
right?
And I think it's just being real with people, man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think it's has everything worked out perfect for every person I put in the military? No. It
never will.
It never will,
no.
Right? It's just, I'm sure there's people out there that'll tell you that they had the worst recruiter in the world.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it didn't work out for me.
Some people probably think Nick Saban's the worst coach in the world.
Right. It just, exactly. But I'll tell you this, there's not a single kid that I go to bed and I go, oh yeah, I screwed that kid or I lied to that kid. Like I've said this, when it comes time, I can stand at the pearly gates and I can say, yeah, I was as truthful as I could, as honest as I could be, and told them what I knew. Right. So, and I've still gone that way, but where I really figured out that I was winning at recruiting, not so much, I shouldn't say winning at recruiting, but where I figured out I was doing the right thing. I was in Watkins again, spent a lot of time at Watkins, right? Like I did. I mean, because you're a big school, right?
Yeah,
like
we're one of the biggest in Lincoln County, I believe.
Yeah, you were the biggest school I had, right? It was you were Heights, and I didn't go over to Heights a whole lot, and it just didn't have the contacts over there, right? Nothing against Heights or whatever. And
yeah, they suck anyway.
I'm not gonna say that, man. I still got recruiters there, right? Like
that's just our rival. So
right. So when I learned I was winning though, man, I'm in Watkins and the old school, right? You walk up, you go up the steps of the gym, and I'm walking down the hall and I'm in uniform and there's two girls that come walking by. And the one girl, like I'd seen her in class when I did presentations or something like that, but I didn't know her name. And she's like, hey, Sergeant Mohler, what's up? I'm like, hey, what's going on? How are you today? And she's like, I'm good, And I hear her friend, as soon as they pass me, her friend goes, do you know him? And she's like, well, everybody knows Sergeant Mohler, and she's like, he's a recruiter. And I mean, this is real quick conversation they're having, but I can hear it. They're laughing because it echoes,
Yeah.
And I'm like,
especially in those empty hallways.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Would.
And she's like, yeah, Mohler's not like the rest of them. He's cool. Like he doesn't push it on you. And I think that's always been the thing, right? Like if you guys want to join or if people want to join, so be it. I'll help you along the way. But if you don't, like I told you, and I guess we haven't really talked about this with anybody on here, but I mean, our relationship started as you were a high school kid. I was a recruiter.
Yeah.
And we just got to know one another. Right. In your senior year, you were stuck.
Oh yeah.
Hey, do I go to the military or, do I go play college football?
Yeah.
And I think I told you, I said, I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
I tried to help you find the best path for you, but I said, Cole, whatever you do, you got to make the best decision for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, right? With the military, like, people are always like, I got to be 100% sure this is what I want to do.
I don't feel like you're ever 100% sure on decisions.
And that's what I was going to say. I'm going to tell you right now, man, I was on a plane headed to basic training going, I don't think I don't know what I did, I mean, I was at AIT. I was at, tech, they call it tech school or advanced individual training school. And I can remember thinking, what did I do? Why am I here? I could be doing, I could have been at the ranch again, or I could have been doing this, or, like all these things. And but, when we talked, it was always, hey, this is what you're going to do. Right. And then obviously, you went off to play college football and you decided that was the best thing. And then, our paths diverted. I mean, for 5 or 6 years. And then, here, I'm coaching softball with Steve and we're talking about all this weird stuff. And he's like, I got this guy that works for me. He's a really good athlete. And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then, he tells me the name, right? He's like, Cole. And I'm like, Cole, it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't think it. And then I don't know how it came up the one day, or I came down here. I guess I was here.
Yeah.
Came by the shop and you're like.
It's when you guys were looking at jerseys. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what
it was right here in this
room. Right. That was last year. Right. Yeah. Like, and then, you noticed who I was, and then and then I'm like, still hadn't hit me until he starts telling me, and I'm like, oh shit. And then, here we are. So, but I mean but that's always been my thing, right? Like it's just, you got to go grind. You got to find a way. And the other thing is you got to be, you got to take care of people. And I'll be honest, man, I'm not everybody's cup of tea.
All right. But you can't, and that goes with not trying to be a people pleaser, because if you're trying to be a people pleaser, you're wearing too many different hats and not being your true self.
I think, I joke with my wife, like I don't like people, and I've had people tell me like,
sounds familiar. Like the guy that I work for,
right.
He also doesn't like people, but has to talk to people for a living kind
right.
of.
And it's not that I don't like people, I think, it's funny, like we talk about, you want to talk about that, like me and Steve, right? Like we say we don't like people, right? I think when you do a job where all you do is talk to people all day, the last thing you want to do when you get home is talk to people, right? Like, my wife always used to joke when I was really recruiting, because I recruited for 5 or 6 years, was a team leader, and then I ran the marketing office for the state of Ohio, and then came back to recruit and been a team leader. And she, I'd walk in the door and she'd start asking questions, and I would and I'm a talker, right? We figured this out in the last hour, but she, she would always be like, I give her one word answer, and she's like, talked to a lot of people today, huh? I'm like, sure did, and it just, didn't, but like I said, it's funny to me because, we talk about this, like, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, right? Like you said, but I'm not the same kid I was in high school either. Right. Right. Like, and my parents were always, my mom always pushed that, right? She's like, you're going to go on to do things, right? You're going to go on to make choices. The people that your high school friends, not many you're not going to have that whole group of friends forever. Right. Nope. I have 2 of them I still talk to, right? I run into the other ones. Yeah. Like we talk, right? The guy that I hung out at Robin Farm with, like his daughter plays AU, so we run into one another. We sit there and we talk, but even my high school friends, I don't know the last time we all got together, know. And it's not that I don't. It's just, and I've learned too with the military, like people come in your life and people go out of your life, right? Constantly, right? You came into my life, you left my life. Now you're back into my life, right? Steve came into my life, right? For the last 3 years, we coached softball together. We were spent a lot of time together, right? Now we're kind of doing our different things, right? So, not that it's bad. Nobody's mad about it. Yeah. Like we get along. Like, hey, whatever. We're doing what's best for we think's best, and but we don't talk as much. But like Steve's a good buddy, and but I hear I've had people tell me, oh, you're intense all the time, and I'm like, I'm not intense. You just don't know me. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, I see that makes sense. Right? Like you don't know, like, how do I say this? Like, I am intense. To them I'm intense, but it's not that I'm intense. It's not like an intense of like it makes you tense up being around you. Like it's just kind of your nature, and people view it as a more intense than what I feel like it actually is. It's not, you're not coming off like intense as in like a hard ass per se, or even like straight and narrow all the time. Like you can joke around but still be intense at the same time. Right. And I think, I catch a lot of flack, right? Like I'm hard on my kids when it comes to sports, right? And maybe to a fault, right? Like we'll talk about this. Like we'll be real, right? Like, I've had to do some, I had a conversation with my wife the other night about this, right? I've had to do some deep, hard looks at how I deal with my kids in sports, right? It's not that I don't love my kids, right? Their success, like, I don't have aspirations that any of my kids are going to go on to play D1 or professional sports, right? Like let's be honest, right? Their mom's 5'7", I'm 5'9", right? Gymnast might be in luck. yeah, gymnast might be in luck, right? But she struggles with some of the mental issues that I did riding bulls, right? Like, but I'm super hard on my kids when it comes to athletics, right? And it's not, and I think there's a few things, right? Because I've done a deep dive look at this over the last week or so, right? Because, why? Does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. But it does matter. Not aspirations that they're going to go play pro sports. There are no aspirations that they're going to go play in college, right? Like if that's what they want to do and that's what happens, great, right? It's their life, right? Like I get the question all the time. Like when we had a son, right? We had 2 girls and then we had a son. What was the question I always got asked? Is your son going to ride bulls? Yep. I don't care. I don't know. That's up to him. Yeah. And I'll be honest, he has no aspirations of it at this point. He's not all in, right? But where I'm hard on my kids is I think sports are a life lesson. Oh yeah. Right? I've said this, people laugh all the time, right? They laugh like, and I'll be honest, I almost got thrown out of the Y a couple years ago, yelling at a referee. That was stupid, right? Like I don't know why I did it, but I was mad. I got mad at a call. But for me, life's not easy, right? And I think, too much now we take and, these kids, man, they got it easy, like we were talking the other night, like you go to college now, right? AI does your paper for you. No kidding. Right? That didn't exist when I was in school. Right. And then you've got things like, these note takers in class, right? Yeah. And I used to struggle. They literally just hit record. Right. And then it puts all the
Literally,
notes, right? My wife's showing it to me. So, so it's like we keep making things easier and easier, but for me, it's the thing I'm always on my kids about is effort. Give me effort.
Yeah. My college football coach always used to say, I don't care if you fuck up, but fuck up full speed.
Yeah.
He said, I can fix a mistake. I can't fix your effort.
Right. And I think that's the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
That's the hardest part for me to get across to my kids, right? We go effort, now the boy, he's got to see his sisters get yelled at, right? So effort's never been an issue, right?
Yeah.
But he's kind of the baby, right? He gets away with stuff, right? Like,
That was me.
right. And, but my thing has always been effort, right? The oldest one gets it the hardest, right?
Yep.
And it's not because I don't want her to fail because I know that's what she wants, right? Like if she's a starter on the she's a starter on the basketball team, like I tried to explain it to him last night. I tried to explain to both the girls, right? It's like King of the Hill, right? You're on the mountaintop now. You're a starter. But you got people coming from the bottom.
You know that thing that you were chasing just a minute ago?
Right.
There's other people that are doing the same thing.
Right. And, and I've seen her get knocked off the hill and then have to work her way back. And every time it's like when she gets knocked, it's just, she's crushed. Mm-hmm. And I ask her every day, what did you do today to get better? And where I get so frustrated with my kids or where I'm hard on them is it's the little things, right? Now, granted, they're 13 and 11, right? But we talk about, she had a game the other night. After the game, right? They win 42-4, whatever. I don't know. They blow the team out. and then they're a good little basketball team. She walks over to me and we get, and we're talking and I'm like, wait, we got to talk, right? So we get in the car on the way home and, it's a 5-minute ride. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I was like, she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you didn't play hard tonight. It's like, you knew they weren't as good as you, so you took time off. You took, not that I said you didn't play bad, but I said, did you box out?
Yeah.
No, I didn't box out. Why? Your AU coach has told you he wants you to box out. We've told you need to box out. Your coach has told you need to box out. So why are you being told here, but now tonight you just want to take the day off? That's the kind of stuff that irritates me and where I'm hard on my kids. Because I feel like with social media, too much of this, right? Like, and we all know it. There's people out there. Every time their kid is successful at something, they post it, right? I see you rolling your head back, right?
I'm sorry. Softball moms are the worst at this. They're the ones that post everything on social media as soon as something good happens. Not every one of them, but I see it a lot with a lot of softball moms now that I'm venturing more into this softball world with some of the stuff that I'm doing. I feel like, I don't know, I guess I haven't noticed it as much with other sports, but I feel like softball, I noticed it a lot more than most. But yeah, social media, you see it all over social media all the time.
But we also don't talk about when they have a bad game. Mm-hmm. Right? So what are we doing with our kids, right? Like to me, right? What I'm trying to prepare my kids for, and I'm going to be hard on them, right? Like I'm going to be harder on you than anybody else will ever be. Mm-hmm. Because when you get to your job and your boss is mad because you made a mistake, you're not crushed that you failed. Now, maybe I take it too far. I've often joked that my kids will be one of two things. They'll either be great athletes and they'll be super resilient, or they'll all be in counseling. Either way, it's going to cost me money, right? But that's the biggest thing for me, right? And I think, for me too, I think there's a lot of opportunities that they're given, right? Like, I don't want to say that I'm living vicariously through my kids, right? Like I know parents that do, right?
Yeah.
We got to win. We got to be on this team. We got to do this, right? Like or all, they want to, their kids playing football. You remember, you hear it, right?
Yeah.
You go to any high school football game, right? There's always going to be a group of guys, talking about their glory days, right?
I've been back to one high school football game, and I don't think I'll go to another one, honestly, because I don't like living that like past life of like, when I'm with my buddy, like my best friend from high school, we'll relive, like we'll talk about those some days sometimes, but I don't want to go talk to people, one, that I haven't talked to in a bunch of years that I was never really close with anyway, and have to listen to old football stories because those days are behind me. Did I learn a lot through it? Did I have a lot of fun? Absolutely. But those days are behind me. I don't know. I was different about high school. Like I liked high school, but then also at the same time I was ready to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. And I think it's, but I think too, the difference is, right, you got to go on and play in college.
That's true. Yeah.
Right?
I got to do something that I think I was the only one in my class that played all 4 years.
Right. But you found something else that replaced that Friday night, right?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I don't care what anybody says. There's never a better feeling than that fresh, because we didn't play on turf. You did.
Yeah,
I didn't play on turf.
I got put in going into my freshman year. I got very lucky.
We played it, but there was always something about, especially at Sheridan, right? I don't know if you've ever been to Sheridan High School, but I think it's one of the most gorgeous places for a Friday night game in the fall, right? You got all the corn's all grown up, right? It's all tasseled out, the sun's setting, right? And then the dew sets in and the smell, and then there's a light breeze. There's no, you hear all the analogies, right? I'd go back and do it all over again. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that one more time, right? Lace it up. Right now, my body would never be able to hold up and do that. But, but I also in the same thing, it didn't bother me not to go back and play high school football. But I was rodeoing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I will agree to that. Nothing can replace a Friday night game. I played in 30, I don't know how many games we played my senior year, 30-some college football games. Nothing will beat none of those games beat a Friday night lights, under the lights in high school.
Well, because everybody in the stands.
That's true too.
Right? Everybody in the stands. It's friends, it's family, it's people you've grown up with, right? When it's over, right? I don't know how you were after a game, but it was like trying to get out of the locker room to get to your, when you're leaving, everybody's like, hey, great game, whatever. But it goes back to, and I don't even know how we got on the football Friday night thing now. Sorry. But, but talking about my kids and sports and being intense with them, right? And I know where I was going with this. Part of it is I look back and I realize the opportunities that I didn't take, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were some opportunities that I missed, there was probably some times I should have gone to a rodeo and I didn't, or I didn't have the money to go, the 1 year I had some money won, had I gone to a couple more rodeos, maybe I would have enough to go to, Cheyenne or something like that, but I just didn't have the money, right? So I didn't. And, but I look back and I'm like, oh, if I would have done this and I would have done that. Right. And, I think, we with kids, man, we're so afraid that, they're so afraid they're going to make mistakes. Right. My kids are too, right? They're always afraid. I'm going to disappoint Dad. I said, you're never going to disappoint me. You got to go, right? Yeah. You got to go, right? But I think I think the thing about youth sports where it really drives me nuts, right, is I understand you want your kid to go play in college. I do. That's awesome. If that's your goal. But, I just don't know if that's a realistic expectation when they're 7, 8, 9 years old.
No.
Maybe 10. Right?
I don't think my parents even thought I'd have a chance when I was 7, 8, 9 years old to go play. I guarantee you they didn't think I'd go play college football.
Well,
I wasn't even playing football yet.
Right. And I think it's 7, 8, 9, right? Those aren't even going to be your best athletes.
No.
That's what I've always told people. You look at these youth programs, you're like, oh, they're really good. And then you look at their high school teams and they suck. And you're like, wow, what happened?
My brother, when he was in high school or middle school, their football teams went undefeated 7th and 8th grade. I think he won 2 games his senior year.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. When you're younger, it doesn't really matter until about your sophomore year. That's when you start seeing what your class wise, how good your class is. That's when it really starts to kick in my opinion.
Well, I think somebody asked me the other day, because we obviously coached 10U last year. Now we're coaching 12U, right? And they said, what's the biggest difference? Is it the ball being 12 inches? Is it the extra 5 feet in the pitching? And I'm like, no. It's half the girls have been through puberty and half haven't.
Yeah.
As the younger group, right? We got girls. My daughter's the youngest girl on the team. She just turned 11
right
in November, 3 weeks ago. So, there's girls, that we're playing against that some of them, and we're playing on the old rule system of USA rules or U-Trip rules. So it's a January 1st. Some of these girls are 2 years older than her.
Yeah.
And they walk out next to her and I'm like, are you going to prom or did you drive yourself here? Right. Like, but I tell my wife all the time, like, I don't know what she's going to be as a softball player. I don't know what she's going to be as a gymnast, right? Because there's some biological things that need to happen that are going to happen whether we wanted to or not. Now, when that comes, I don't know, but it's going to change. It's going to change, right? What if she grows 7-8 inches?
Yeah.
She's probably not going to be a gymnast.
No.
You know, what if she doesn't grow? Well, she might be a gymnast, you know, like, and she may not be a softball player, right? I don't know. But I see the difference in the girls that have gone through puberty already, right? Like they're just bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, right? And I've told my wife, like, hey, if she's hanging on this level, she may not be the best kid on the team, right? We don't want her to be the best kid. She may be number 8, number 9, number 10, number 11 on the team, right? She's not. But she's only going to get bigger, stronger, faster.
You're right.
Our ceiling is pretty high still.
Right.
You know, we've got room to grow. But the one thing, like I've said with my kids, and where I'm hard on them, it's all about effort, man.
Yes, 100%.
You know, they got to grind, and it frustrates me. It frustrates me with my kids more than anything, right? Like, effort takes no talent.
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's everything that I've done, right? I've never been the best recruiter. I was never the smartest recruiter, right? I don't have a college degree. I went to college and just didn't like reading, right? Like, you know, a lot of people, like I said, will look at my bull riding and say, oh, you never made it. You failed. I don't think see it as a failure. I know all the hoops and paths I had to go to get to that spot, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of things like, you know, that we didn't talk about how did you know to go pro? How did you know not to buy your card, right? Like, I mean, that's a whole 30-minute story if you get in the long story of it, you know. But I think you gotta, what I try to tell people, and you know, and I, when they ask, you know, and you know, we talked about doing this podcast. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? You know, I didn't know, right? I didn't know what we were going to talk about, but what I'll tell you is, you know, it was like, all right, you know, it's kind of like even doing this, right? Like, you've been asking me 6 months to do this. Eventually I was like, okay, we just got to find a way.
Yeah.
Like, when I finally just said, hey man, I promise we're going to do it this week.
Yep.
Right? Like, we had to figure out somebody to get the kids from practice. We had to do this, right? Because I told you, man, I'm busy all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, but yeah. So, I mean, for the people out there that, you know, if you run into me and you see me with my kids, yeah, am I hard on them in athletics? Yeah. Not because I think they're going to be college athletes. Not because I want them to be pro athletes. My kids quit their sports today. I don't care.
But the lessons they learn through those sports are going to carry through life, and that comes with that as effort. And it's no different than when you go into a job and if you don't give effort, and it's, you know, it's not necessarily running as fast as you can, that type of effort. It's a different type of effort, whether it's productivity and stuff like that. Right. If you're not giving effort, you're not going to get that promotion, or you might not have that job very much longer. So it's a lesson that carries throughout life, not just in that sport, and that may end in high school or whenever it actually ends.
Yeah. So for me, that's what I'm trying to get across to my kids. Give me everything you got. Let's go full speed. Now, the one thing, I don't care if they score, right? Like I've said with my oldest daughter, right? She was not a very good basketball player, right? Didn't make the team in 4th grade, whatever. Not a big deal, right? She's 4th grade. Was I mad about it? Not mad, but I was like, what do you do, right?
Yeah.
You know, at 4th grade, what do you do, right? Like, she's devastated. And I told her, I said, you got 3 options. You know, and keep in mind, she's 9 years old, right? I'm having this conversation. I said, you got 3 options. You can roll over and just quit. You can play at the Y for the next few years, or you can get serious about basketball and we'll help you, you know, and we did. You know, we got her in with training with a guy here in Newark and who's phenomenal, you know, and he's hard on him. Like, it's not sugar-coated, right? And I've heard people say, oh, he's way too intense. Awesome.
I want my trainers to be that way.
Yeah, and that's what I tell my kid. You know, I tell my wife all the time. I want them to tell them the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I need to hear, right? Back to the same thing.
Yep.
Stop doing what I need to do and start doing, you know, however that saying was, you know. But we got to be truthful, right? Yeah. And I think that's the thing with sports with our kids. It's, you know, it's grandma and grandpa's job, right? My mom and dad come to games, right? I don't care how bad my kids play. My mom and dad are going to look at them and say, they did great to their face, right? Yep. And then my dad's going to be like, hey, she didn't do so well on this, or he didn't do so well on this, or he struck out, right? But that's grandma and grandpa, right?
Yeah.
I'll be the same way, right?
Yeah.
I yelled at you three. You three can do what you want, right?
That's why people always get so mad at watching. They're like, "You guys were never that nice to us."
and it's funny because my dad was never a yeller, right? He didn't yell at me. The only thing he ever yelled at me about was effort. And whatever you start, you finish. Those were his rules.
Yep. Sounds familiar to my parents.
And I'll be honest with you. I wish he would have yelled at me more, because I think I struggled at times when I got yelled at. I wasn't a bad kid.
Yeah.
I wasn't a drinker. I never did anything through high school. Even rodeo. I was doing crazy things, but I was always realized like this is never going to be the end of it, right?
Yeah.
Like I gotta have a plan, right? You can't get in trouble, can't go to jail, right? I'm not out smoking weed. I'm not taking opportunities away. It's it was controlled chaos, right? Like instead of just total chaos. But I've said this to my wife. I wish my dad would have yelled at me. I wish he would have gotten on me and been hard on me, And I've asked him about it. Why weren't you so hard on me? And he goes, because I could tell you something and you would just do it.
That makes you don't have to yell.
Right. Like and for me, I think that's the hard part with my kids, right? Because they got all these opportunities, right? And I have a hard time sometimes, right? Because like we talk about the rodeo thing, right? I loved it, man, right? Anything I could get a piece of it, right? I didn't care if it was like I said, a 10-minute clip on ESPN or the George Michael Sports Machine.
Yeah.
I got a little taste of it, right? I didn't care if it was hanging out at a roping farm, chasing roping cows, or pushing cows up into I got a taste of it. I got a little dirt on my boots today. I got a little dirt on my hands. Like I was in it. And I think that's the hard thing that I see with my kids, right? Do you really love it? And I've had this conversation with my oldest. Do you love it? And she's like, what do you mean? Like she didn't watch basketball on TV. She'll watch Ohio State every now and then.
Yeah.
My son doesn't, he watches he doesn't watch the Browns. Not granted, he's 8. So, but my middle daughter, she's a gymnast. The Olympics. She didn't even watch gymnastics at the Olympics.
Heck, I watched the Olympics at the gym.
She did a little bit this year, right? But that was all we had.
Yeah.
You had TV. It was like you have TV. They have just so many other distractions.
Yeah.
And
I think one of Steve's daughters was in here watching on YouTube. Like I walked in and it was like Simone Biles on YouTube. And I'm like, first off, I didn't even know how YouTube worked when I don't even think we had it, but I wouldn't have known how it worked at your age. So like they have so many, they may watch it, but it may just be also different versions than what we're used to.
Well, you're right. And my kids do, right? They do watch it on YouTube, right? Different things and softball videos and it's just not, typical TV that we watch.
Yeah.
And, but those are, so when people tell me, yeah, you're intense on your kids. Yeah, I am intense because life's hard, man. Life's, like, and I don't want to sound like a broken record or somebody like old dad sitting here, giving that life advice, but it's hard. Right. So I tell my guys at basic training, they're getting ready to go to basic training all the time. I'm like, guys, it's going to be hard. And then, they're like, people are like, oh, it was harder than when I went through. It's a different time, man.
Yeah.
Like I don't, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's, I think we as people, like our society right now is just like, oh, it's hard. Right. And it leads to all kinds of other things, right? Like we can go down that path of,
we'll have to, honestly, I need to have you on a Beyond the Surface because the Beyond the Surface is where we like take this guest episode and like each episode we kind of dive into different things. So like, and we dive deeper into them. That's what I love. Those are the ones that I love because I love the guest ones, but like the Beyond the Surface is when I personally, cause I talk more in the Beyond the Surfaces. It's different than the guest setup. It's me and Dante and we really dive into them, but I love it because I kind of get to like really put my opinion out there. And also like me and Dante, just the way me and him can talk about things, he brings perspectives that I never thought of and I bring perspectives that he's never thought of and we clash them together and like kind of go off of it. So yeah, you need to do a Beyond the Surface with us. That'd be a good one.
Yeah. I think, probably, and for me, right? Like I've just had a lot of different experiences, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of different ways people live, right? Like the way people live in Wyoming is way different than here, right? Like,
right.
the way things are viewed in, Texas and, or North Carolina, right? It's, it's different, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Perry County and it'll always be home. But I mean, there's a lot of things when I left Perry County, I was like, whoa, it's a whole big world out here, but yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think a lot of times too, people are just right now, man, you're afraid of, they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Right. And look, man, I've done this military thing for 25 years, right? I've served with people that we don't have the same opinions. We don't agree. We don't agree on everything. Me and Steve don't agree on everything. Right. Steve's one of my best friends, right? I know, keep going back to Steve, but we don't always agree on anything. We've argued. We've gotten mad at one another, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think the problem we run into now is it's like, well, this is my opinion, and it's right, and I think whether good, bad, ugly, right? Because I can't, obviously with what I do in the military, I'm not going to talk politics, right? Like I have my beliefs, and exactly. I told you that, right? And but there's opinions too, right? Like, oh, should people join the military? Should they not join the military, right? I can tell you this, on that one, right? Like, that's simple, man. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Hell yeah, if that's what you want to do. But what I'll tell you is it's I can't make that decision if it's for you or if it's not for you.
Right.
Like that's I don't know. But, I'll tell you I'm a better person because of it. Now would I go back and do it all over again? Hell no. No. Right? It's been, would I go back and join? Yeah. Would I have done it the same way? Probably not. Right. I don't know. You ask me in 4 years when I retire, I'll probably be like, hell yeah, I'm 50 years old. This is good stuff. But yeah, it's, like I said, it's people's opinions and, and those things that are out there, on different issues and controversies and stuff like this. And, and I think that's where sports, right? They teach you to work as a team, right? Mm-hmm. And we're kind of running around this, but, they bring you together, right?
Right.
But it always still comes back to the same thing. Find a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's always basic training's hard. I got to find a way.
Right.
You know what my way was at basic training? What got me through it?
What's up?
I had a 94 Dodge. I wanted a Dodge Ram pickup, right? Dodge Ram was the sponsor of Pro Rodeo, right? It's serious. I wanted a Dodge Ram pickup. And, obviously I was going through there, right? And I was like, man, 6 o'clock in the morning PT, right? Got drill sergeants out there. They're yelling at you. We're in South Carolina, Fort Jackson. I don't even know what they call it now. They renamed it. But I'm at Fort Jackson, it's cold. It's January, February. We're doing, Army PT. And it sucked. Right. And, I'm not a morning person. It's what's so funny that I'm like, hate mornings, right? Hate them. And, I had a drill sergeant. I can't remember his name, man, but he had a Dodge pickup. He used to park it right by the PT field and we would face it. And as I'm doing push-ups, man, or we're doing something, I just kept staring at that truck. And every day I'm like, 8.5 weeks.
Find a way.
8 weeks. What? Right. Find my way. Find the way, right? What's it going to be? And, I'll be honest though, basic, our military was great for me. Like the military's made me who I am. I was not a quiet kid in high school, but I was not a go against the grain kid. Right. Like I'll be honest. I was probably a little soft at times, right? But I was going to wear jeans and t-shirt every day. Jeans, t-shirt, tennis shoes. That way you can't make fun of me, right? My mom buy me a sweater. Why don't you wear this? Or, what? Oh, I can't wear this. Like I was always afraid, like, I don't want to get made fun of, or when we played football, right? I was not, I wasn't a captain, right? I was going to go out. I was going to work hard. I was going to go about my business, but I was not the guy that was going to stand there and jump a guy's ass if he made a mistake. Right. That wasn't me. And it wasn't until, the Army did that to me. And I got the basic training and I got down there and all of a sudden, man, like I'm in charge of my platoon and I'm like, all right, and then got to Fort Bragg and, so fortunate on those things, like I said, that I got to rodeo while I was there for the Army. And listen, I had a commander that was from Texas. I had a platoon sergeant that was from Texas that had rode bulls. So that helped, right? Yeah. Like, it was just one of those things that felt like it was meant to be, right? It's just the way it worked. But, you know, so it's, you just gotta, you know, see, this is what I do. I lose my train of thought. But yeah, it was, you know, like I said, it was good. You know, it made me who I was, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. It made me who I was, right? And it probably changed my opinion on some stuff, right? And as I've gotten older, I mean, I probably am, you know, obviously things have changed the way I view things and, you know, that I did at 23 in college, right? 23 in college, I'm like, whatever, dude. Yep. Like, hey, you know, is what it is, you know. But there's probably some issues out there. I bet people that know me would be like, if I told them where I stood on stuff, they'd be like, whoa, like I did not see that coming, right? Because it doesn't affect me.
Right.
I don't care. You know, I don't care. You know, if the issue doesn't involve me or doesn't involve my family, go live your life.
Right.
Right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't have to agree with you on it, but I'm not going to let it like bother me.
Right.
So
I've tried to get a lot more like that. And especially it happened a lot more for me, like during political season where like people are like, you really don't care about that? And I'm like, no, I really don't care who such and such votes for, because at the end of the day, whether I'm not going to be able to change their mind, and I highly doubt I'm going to be able to change their mind. And honestly, why would I waste my time trying to convince someone of something that they're not going to be like, they're not going to change their mind on? So like, and I'm not going to sit here and let it ruin my whole mood for the day and ruin potentially my whole week.
Well, I think too, like you got to think about that in the other aspect of, right? Like my life situation may not be what yours is.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? My experiences may not, you know, are not what yours are. Right. So the way I think the problem that we have is, and this is what's great about America, right? Like I told you, we're not going to talk politics, but here we go. Right. Like, and we're not going to talk politics, but this is what's great about it. Right. You know, and people have often asked me, like being in the military, like, you know, election time, who are you voting for? What do you think?
None of your damn business, first off.
Well, I just tell them, I'm like, you know, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't tell anybody who I vote for. I don't care, you know, but what it comes down to is where we have a problem, at least in my opinion, right? When we look at these things is your life situation is not my life situation.
Right.
Right. Like there's so many things that like, I would love to sit here and tell you, like, and talk to you about and say, oh, this organization I can't stand, right? But I'm not going to, right? You know, but just because I don't agree with what you believe doesn't mean you're a bad person.
Exactly. That's the part right there. It doesn't make you a bad person.
Right. And I think you see it with families, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like, well, you're for this cause or that cause, and they fight, right? I really don't care.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to do X or you want to do Y, you want to do like what comes down to me at the end of the day is, are you a good person?
Yep. Just
be a good person, right? Go about your day, mind your business. Don't be stealing from people, right? If you want to live in a tiny home, live in a tiny home.
Right.
If you want to live in a huge mansion, live in a huge mansion. You want to drive an electric car, drive an electric car. That's your choice. If I want to drive a F-350 diesel, blowing black smoke, go drive a black diesel, diesel drive. Yeah. Like, don't even worry about it, right? You know, like just do what you want, you know? So I don't know. What other question you got for me?
So I'm going to move into the final question of the podcast that I ask all my guests. We could sit here and easily talk for more hours. We've already been rolling for 2:09, but the question I ask all of my guests is, if you could go back in time and tell your 16-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Oh man, that's tough, right? Like one thing.
Yep.
There's one thing's hard, right? There's lots of things I would love, I think, probably in my situation, and where things turned out, right? Like, I got a great wife, right? Like I married up the food chain. My kids are great, my career's been great, and and none of it's what I planned, right? There was a time I didn't think I'd ever get married, right? I didn't know if I was going to have kids, right? I think The one thing I would probably say, and this, I mean, you've probably heard this before, is trust the process. You'll be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there.
Right. Yep. And that's so hard to do when you're 16 years old because
Buddy, it's hard to do when you're 45 years old.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I want to rush the process now. That's my problem is I want to rush it and I want it now instead of like trusting that not everything's, comes. And, part of that is grinding, but part of it is being impatient at the same time. So, but yeah, I like that. Like trusting the process, like you're going to end up where you're supposed to end up. Whether that you don't know exactly maybe where and your plan you may not be the one that you're going to follow at the end of the day either.
Right. And I think, and I say that a lot, right? I think, when I say that, because I've caught myself, I've said it 5 or 6 times, right? Like, but to me, you've got to have, and I'm not going to turn this into a religious thing, right? You got to have trust in some, I have trust in that I'm going to be where I need to be.
Right.
Right. There's been a lot of things in my life. A lot of situations in my life where I'm like, I don't understand this. Right. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening now to me? Why I deserve this, and I'll tell you this, there was some things that happened. I thought I was going to get promoted a year ago and I didn't. The next thing I know, I'm leaving the marketing office. I'm going back to being a recruiter on the street. And I was like, why? I've already done this. Like I should be doing, I want to do this or I want to go do that or, and I didn't understand it. And and I was bitter about it, yep. Don't get me wrong. Would have loved to have had the money, but now that I'm home and I'm close to home again, I'm like, I'm where I need to be. I'm close to my kids. I get to all their sporting events, right? I can help run kids to practice. I can get kids to dinner. Like I get it, when I got deployed, right, I was like, oh, what is going on here, right? But it worked out. Because I'll be honest, I don't know, had I stayed here, would me and Stacy have worked out? I think so, but I don't know.
Right.
Right? But that was the test for me. That was the thing, because at that point in time, like I'll tell you this, like every girl I dated, I'd get rid of them for the same reason. Right? I'm like, oh, they're crazy. They're all crazy. And then I realized there's one common denominator in all of these relationships, and it was me. And I realized I was the problem, right? So I don't know, would she, like that was the thing that opened my eyes, right? Like, hey, she's going to do this, right? It's always worked out, right? Mm-hmm. Do I regret not having the cows right now? Absolutely, I do. I'd love to have a farm. But I'll be honest with you, I don't have time for a farm.
Right.
I don't have the time to put in the work. Will that come back around at some point? Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
But that's where you just got to trust the process.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about this, but I bought a bass boat. When I came home, I made the joke, right? I'm going to buy a bass boat, right? And I started fishing tournaments and we won't even get into that because I can go on all about failure and all that other stuff. But, I bought this boat and the boat hadn't been in the water in 18 months. 4 years ago, I fished 42 bass tournaments in the summer.
Damn. It's quite the shift.
Right. And now it's all on the softball field. And I got buddies that ask me, dude, like, how are you doing this? Like, how do you do this? And I'm like, it's simple. My kids come first, man.
Yeah.
Right. Like I want to be there. Now my kids may not always want me to be there. I don't know. but I mean, it's, I think that's, but going, like you said, what's the one thing I would tell myself, is just trust the process,
Mm-hmm.
Be patient, trust the process. You'll end up where you're going to end up when you need to end up there. I think we make decisions, but I think that somebody's looking out for us, right?
Yeah.
And people tell you like, oh, this guy did this and that was a bad decision. Was it? Was it a bad decision? Yeah, it may not have been the best decision in our opinion, but then you see a guy down the road, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's got his life together, and that was, hey, and
would probably admit that he needed that to happen.
Right.
In order for things to change.
Oh, listen, dude, you know how many buddies I've got, right? That have hit rock bottom?
Yeah. You need rock bottom sometimes. Not right. That you hope it doesn't take getting to that point for things to change, but sometimes that's what it does take, is getting to that rock bottom for things to, you have to go down before you can really go up. That's what people forget a lot of times.
Right. And I think that, I'm not saying I've ever hit rock bottom, right? But
well, everybody's hit their own version of rock bottom.
Right. I'll be honest, the first time around in recruiting, when I was, I was so successful as a recruiter and I became a team leader, right? It was so hard because I couldn't make you do it. And I struggled with it. I wasn't killing it, right? We weren't killing this team. We were failing. And I was just like, dude, I don't want to fail. And it ate at me and ate at me. And it took a toll on my kids. I think it took a toll on Stace, right? There was probably a point in time I was like, dude, I don't know, man. I didn't know where my life was going. I was just like, I was at a low point, and I didn't even know I was at a low point. That's the scary thing about it, right?
Yeah.
Right. I didn't even know I was. And then I got out of that job and went to, to another job. And as soon, it was like the word, and I became happy, right? Stacy asked me one time, like, why are you, why do you stay up till 3:00? And I'm like, it's the only piece of quiet I get. It's the only time that phone doesn't ring, right? Because you're always a recruiter. Yeah. Phone's always ringing, or you hope it's always ringing, right? But it's, that was, that was hard. Like it's hard, right? Like on that rock bottom. Like, so to me, I was a really low point, right? Like I had a boss that I was working for who outside of work, he was fine, but just super demanding. And I was just like, why are you on me? Like I've been, I'm pushing you, right? That's what I tell my kids too, right? I'm pushing you. Like I'm going to push you to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And there's a fine line there, right?
Right.
And I'll be honest, I've probably gone over it with my kids a couple of times, right? And I've been like, that was pretty, but I make sure I circle back and talk to him.
Right.
But this guy I worked for, man, he was tough. And it made it miserable. And that was my rock bottom, right? At that point in time, right? There's been, I think you always go through rock bottoms, right? When I didn't get promoted, that was kind of a rock bottom. Right? Man, I'd worked my whole career for this and thought I was getting promoted, and the guard system's a little different than the active system, right? There's gotta be a slot, you gotta move. And, and I was number one on the promotion list, and it just, some things happened that, personnel movements, the way they moved them, it didn't work out. And, no fault of anybody's or anything like that. But I was like, I had my hopes up, right? But I would have been driving to Columbus every day.
Yeah.
That sounds miserable now that I think about it, right?
Yeah. I can't stand traffic. So,
right. Like, I would have had to drive up in rush hour traffic, it's not that I don't, wouldn't have loved to have the job or the challenge of it, but I'm where I'm supposed to be,
Right.
So that would be what I would probably tell. There's probably a lot of other things I'd want to tell 16-year-old me. Probably more of the stuff that I tell my kids, like, when you get this opportunity, you need to go, go all the time, do this, right? I wish I would have done things different rodeoing. I wish I would have done things different fishing. I wonder sometimes if I would have done things different, my military career. I wish I would have taken college a little more serious, right? When I was there.
It took me 2 years. Oh, excuse me. It took me 2 years to figure that out. So,
oh, buddy, I was on like the 7-year plan, man. I was careering it up.
I didn't have that option in terms of, getting financial help from my parents. I had 4 years to figure it out, like to get it done. So, and although Ohio Wesleyan only offers 4 years, so I had to get myself out of there in 4 years. So,
right. Yeah. I think that was the problem too, right? Like it wasn't my money. Yeah. Like I had earned it. I never looked at it as my money. I was like, it's like, I'm using the GI Bill or I'm doing this and I'm using the guard scholarship.
That's the first 2 years with loans and realizing like, I don't have to worry about this money now, first off. And like, it's paid for. I don't have to worry about it. And then when you're almost on,
what's that saying? I'm
on
thinking,
academic probation, you,
what's that saying about loans that I'm thinking of right now that I want to tell you? Oh, I told you so.
Yeah. That's right? Fine. You keep using me as an example for other people.
but here's the thing. You had to go do that, right? Like we joke about that, right?
We may not be sitting in this position today if it wasn't for college. I have no idea how my life would have, if I'd have gone, if I'd have joined, I have no idea where my life would have gone. Do I regret going to college? Not necessarily because of the things that came out of it. Do I wish I'd have done it differently? Probably. But at the same time, I'm in the position that I am today because of the choices that have already been made, and I can't go back and change the past, so might as well ride the wave.
Right, and that goes to you're where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there.
Yeah,
right. And it's the other thing. Find a way, right? Like you found a way to get to college, you found a way to make it work. Like there's an old saying out there that they always say about, something about, when you're young, right? It's all wasted. Smarts is wasted on the youth, right? Like, because at 45, you're like, oh, I would have done this. Oh, I would have done this. I would have done it, right? But I think that's the key, right? That we forget, right? It's, and I think of all these cliches in these books and these, hear motivational speakers, but it's, and we talked about at the beginning of this, it's chapters, right? It's chapters in your life, right? I haven't been to a rodeo well, I take it back. We went to Houston rodeo last year, but like, I haven't been like behind the buck and shoots at a rodeo in 10 years. Yeah. I don't talk to many of those guys. That's a chapter in my life, right? My kids will only know it through pictures and maybe a couple of videos, right? Like they're, my grandkids may never know about it, right? It's, and that's where you're at, right? It's a chapter, right? Like you wrote the chapter, we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Because we all would have things we'd go back and change to do. Right. But the things
may turn out better, it may turn out worse.
Right. But the things that what I'm getting at is the choices that you made, right? That you're making right now. Right. Or the choices that you made, like, have made you who you are.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
There's tons of people tell me, oh, I can't believe it. When I joined the military, are you sure that's what you want to do? I don't know. But hey, it was 2 years of my life. Let's, in the beginning, let's just go give it a whirl, see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if my first sergeant intentionally put me on the list to go to Iraq so I take the job. In my opinion, I do. But I'm glad he did.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't understand it at the time. I sure as hell didn't understand it when I was there. Like, I don't know why we ended up back here, right? Like, when we moved to Canton, I wasn't taking a job in recruiting to try to come back here.
Right.
Like, that wasn't even in a conversation that it happened. So it always happens, right? So there's some things that I would change. I say that, but then again, I wonder, would I really?
Right. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Like, I just feel like the life puts you on the path and you're where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. I just hope the good Lord above has a sense of humor, because I've done a lot of dumb things and I hope that, when I get there, he's like, he kind of laughs and he's like, all right, you crazy SOB, get in here, because I haven't been, like I said, like I told you, we all have things that we've messed up in our lives. Right. Like, thank God I've never killed anybody or done anything crazy like that, but we've, there's things like how we've treated somebody or, whatever, that you can't take back. But yeah, man, I'm a rambler. Sorry.
No, I like it. I do. I'm going to wrap it up though. We've been rolling for almost 2.5 now, which I didn't expect, honestly. And, you're nervous for it, but I don't know why.
Well, you let me tell my life story, right? Yeah. So that's not what I thought we were going to talk about. I thought you were going to hammer me with like interviews with questions and stuff like that.
See, I never know exactly how they're going to go. I don't plan them down I just kind of go with the flow of the conversations, how I love to do it. It's more fun. I think, and it makes a better actual conversation that way instead of like one trying to interrupt you all the time and move. Because like if I'd have moved past a few things, then we would have skipped maybe one of those chapters per se. So that's why I like to do it the way I do it.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I think that was hard too. Like, cause it was like, what's he going to ask? What's he going to say?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't ever, for people that are listening that don't know, I do not tell my guests what I'm going to ask. None of my guests know what's about to happen. You got the least of the actual breakdown. Usually I at least send a text. I completely forgot to send a text.
Yeah. I got nothing. I walked in here cold and then I was like,
here's how this is going to go. Yeah, usually I at least send a text, but I didn't this time. And the text usually just kind of gives a rundown of the flow of the podcast, not what it's going to be about. So, but I really appreciate you coming on. This is one that we had in the works for a while, so I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, man, it was a lot of fun, and so it's I'm glad I can help you out, and like I said, we go way back.
Yeah,
but it's cool. It's cool to watch. It's cool to watch how much you've matured and how you've grown, right? Like how your path has gone. And
like Steve said, I'm a little bit different on the podcast. I'm not as.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, the first time I met you, right? Like we always talk about this, right? Like, oh, sunshine, right? It was long golden,
I missed
long
that
hair.
I'd probably get kicked out of the house if I grew my hair back like that again.
Right. But yeah, I mean, so, it's cool to sit down and do this. And, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's, it's what people want to hear.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. But other than some announcements coming out real quick, like I said, we're cranking out these episodes. Like, you do not want to miss the not Reno's Rants. I don't know why I called it Reno's Rants. Reno's Rants are done. Roughnecks Roundtable number 4. I believe it'll be coming out either the day after this one or that week. It's the same week. I know that. I can't remember. But other than that, you guys know the deal. Until next time, life is hard and it's going to knock you down just like a bull does to the bull rider. Don't let that bull of life walk all over you. Get up, grab the bull by the horns, and take control of your life. Roughnecks out.